Shadow Slave. Chapter 376 to 376, Broken Oath. 1329 words. Summoning the runes, he glanced at a particular cluster. Memories. Silver Bell, Puppeteer's Shroud, Midnight Shard, Ordinary Rock, Prowling Thorn, Endless Spring, Blood Blossom, Darkwing, Moonlight Shard, Old Weaver's Mask, Broken Oath. The last one, Broken Oath, came from the twisted simulacrum of one of the 7 ancient heroes of the Forgotten Shore, the Lord. Even though the coral golem had turned out to be just an awakened monster, Sunny had high hopes for this memory. But before he concentrated on it, Sunny stared at the rest of his arsenal. 1, 2, 3, 12. After a year of constant battles and bloodshed, he only had 12 memories. Of course, he would have had much more if not for the need to feed Saint. The taciturn creature demanded a vast amount of resources to get her to the 200 shadow fragments, which was one of his goals. If not for that, he would have made a real windfall. Sunny already considered himself wealthy thanks to the contribution points teacher Julius was going to arrange for him. But if he had a dozen or 2 extra memories to sell, well, he would have been not just wealthy but extravagantly so. Enough to buy several houses, if he wished to. Maybe he still could sell some. Looking at his trusty weapons and tools, Sunny hesitated. Now that he could use Shadow Step to blink from one place to another, he didn't need to enhance his mobility that much. So, Prowling Thorn and Darkwing were potential candidates to be auctioned off, maybe. They still had their uses, though. The rest he couldn't even imagine selling, at least not before finding better alternatives. Even the Silver Bell, which wasn't really all that useful, but had something of a sentimental value. The little bell was the first memory he had ever received, after all. And its description was, it touched something in his heart. Curses, I just used the stimulant. Why is my mind so scattered? With a frown, Sunny finally concentrated on his new memory. Memory, Broken Oath, Memory Rank, Awakened, Memory Tier, I, Memory Type, Charm. His eyes widened slightly. Jackpot, another charm, such luck. Excited, Sunny read further. Memory description, they made a terrible oath to destroy the curse, or be consumed by it. Those who have broken the oath were consumed by the curse, and those consumed by the curse have broken their oath. In the end, none could escape their promise. Morbid, I guess that's how the Carapace Legion was born. He looked at the next string of runes. Memory enchantments, Oathbreaker, enchantment description, the broken oath erodes souls of all those who approach it. Sunny held his breath for a few moments. A soul attack, both the nightmare creatures and the awakened had many ways to destroy their enemies. Kinetic damage, called physical for simplicity, was the most common, but there were many others. Among them, soul damage was the rarest and hardest to defend against. It was no coincidence that Soul Reaper Jet, whose aspect allowed her to strike directly at the soul, was so feared. And now, Sunny had a soul attack of his own in the arsenal. There was one problem, however. Wait, erode souls of all who come near. Will it affect me then, as well? A deep scowl appeared on his face. Sunny hesitated for a while, then sighed, and summoned the memory into existence. Soon, a glistening gem made out of polished crimson coral appeared in his hand. A second later, he suddenly shuddered and groaned. As soon as the broken oath appeared, a sickening sensation permeated his entire being. It was as though someone was slowly draining the very life out of him. Not only that, but he also felt weaker. Looking down, Sunny saw his shadows ripple and react. The surly one stared at him with outrage and waved its hands in the air angrily, while the friendly one was hugging itself pitifully and pacing. Damnation, he had recognized the debilitating feeling that the gem produced. It was the same aura that had weakened him when he fought the coral golem. It was also the infinitely weaker version of the annihilating soul attack of the artificial sun. Gritting his teeth, Sunny dismissed the broken oath. Only when it disappeared completely could he breathe freely again. Crap, that was one serious side effect. How was he supposed to use his new charm if it would be slowly killing not only his enemies but also Sunny himself? Drop it on the ground, use Shadow Step to blink away, and hope for the best. Sunny sat quietly for a while, thinking. Then, a tentative smile appeared on his face. Wait, that should work, right? Turning away from the runes describing the soul-destroying gem, he concentrated on the description of his loyal shadow demon. Shadow, Marble Saint, Shadow Rank, Awakened, Shadow Class, Demon, Shadow Attributes, Battle Master, Stalwart, Spark of Divinity, Shadow Abilities, Weapon Sage, Underworld Armament, Shadow Fragments, 8200ths. Concentrating on the Underworld Armament ability, Sunny read. Shadow Saint's armor can accommodate a charm memory to inherit its enchantments. His smile widened. Good, that's the first part. Looking a bit higher, he found another string of runes. Attribute, Stalwart, Attribute description. The Stone Saint is highly resistant to all forms of damage, as well as being fully immune to mind and soul attacks. Fully immune to mind and soul attacks. Yes, Sunny let out a satisfied sigh. The broken oath was pretty useless by itself, but when combined with Saint's special ability and attributes, it would make his shadow even more lethal. That was because Saint was a very special kind of demon, one whose will couldn't be intruded upon or shaken. Both her mind and her soul, well, the shadow that inhabited her body instead of a soul, were utterly indomitable. He only had to make sure to not be anywhere near the living statue while she had the crimson gem set into her armor. Tricky, but doable, and speaking of armor, he was not done exploring his memories yet. In fact, he had left the best for last. Looking at the shimmering runes, Sunny concentrated on a particular string. One that looked broken and incomplete. Memory, oath. Now that he was awakened, he could finally restore the broken onyx armor he had bought from Stev for a measly handful of soul shards. The ascended suit of armor of the 6th tier, the most powerful memory he owned. Or have seen, even, well, except for the Weaver's Mask, of course. Summoning the old Sunny strained his muscles and, with some effort, managed to place it on the floor in front of him. Even now that he was an awakened, the weight of the stone memory was not something he could endure easily without using both of his shadows or wasting essence to enhance his strength. Breathing a bit heavily, Sunny studied the damaged memory. The suit of ancient plate armor was jet black in color. Its design was intricate and solemn, radiating a feeling of dark resolve and stalwart, adamantine grace. Its glossy surface seemed to absorb and devour any light that fell on it. All parts of the armor were perfectly fitted to one another, creating an almost seamless barrier of impenetrable steel. Well, not steel, yet. Stone. The ancient armor looked extremely similar to the one Stone Saint had worn, and now that the shadow was a demon, they were even more alike. The onyx armor in front of Sunny was still more impressive, though. More regal, as if created for a being of a higher status. And just like the armor worn by the saint, it would only transform from actual stone into the miraculous stone-like alloy if risen from its passive state. It couldn't be done yet, though, because its spell weave was damaged. To repair it, the self-restoring properties of the broken memory had to be activated by an infusion of essence, which no one back on the Forgotten Shore could do. Now, however, things were different. Now, Sunny was unawakened. Not only could he control the flow of shadow essence inside his body, he even had the soul serpent to help him guide it. Placing his hands on the cold surface of the onyx breastplate, Sunny closed his eyes and sent the essence into the onyx armor. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 377 to 377, Mantle of the Underworld. 1012 words. The shadow essence flowed through the coils of the soul serpent into his left hand, then surged into the cold black onyx. There was no resistance that Sunny had to overcome to transfer it from his body into the stone armor. After all, the armor was his memory, and as such, could be considered to be a part of his soul. The surge of energy rushed through the ancient armament, then returned to his body through his right hand. Soon, a stable cycle was established, with a constant current of shadow essence circulating through both Sunny himself and the onyx armor. It was a strange feeling, as if there was an ethereal river flowing through him, moving endlessly in a circle. Thanks to the shadow guide attribute of the soul serpent, its current was especially swift and powerful. Soon, the onyx armor became saturated by shadow essence. As Sunny watched, it slowly began to change. This was the fundamental trait of both Saint and her armaments, with which the memory shared a common origin. Both were made out of a strange living stone. When imbued with soul energy, the taciturn demon's body turned from stone to bizarre stone-like flesh, while her weapons turned to stone-like steel. Sunny knew this because he had seen the remains of both the original Stone Saint and her fellow Stone Warrior after they had been defeated by the monstrous iron spiders. After being destroyed, the living statues had turned back into inanimate stone. The memory was transforming right in front of his eyes. Soon, its glossy black surface felt different to the touch. Colder, lighter, more resilient, closer to metal than stone. The living armament had assumed its true form. And now, the most important part. Sunny gazed through the dark metal and peered at the ethereal weave hiding beneath it. The pattern of the diamond string was much more complex and vast than any that he had ever seen, with the exception of the weaver's mask. But then, nothing could compare to that miraculous memory. There were 6 bright embers serving as anchors for the countless threads of light inside the onyx armor. However, the weave was damaged and chaotic. Thousands of strings were torn and disconnected from the rest of the pattern, breaking its flow and logic. Because of that, the armor couldn't repair itself before. It needed to be imbued with essence and turned from dead stone to enchanted metal for the self-repairing properties that all memories possess to come into effect. And now, it was. With an expression of wonder on his face, Sunny observed as the spell weave started to repair itself. The diamond string moved against the invisible winds that had been playing with them before. The torn ends turned whole again, the separated threads became connected to the rest of the pattern once more. Thousands upon thousands of ethereal strings moved in unison, their motions full of strange symmetry and grace. Watching the beautiful weave restore itself filled Sunny with a deep feeling of satisfaction. He smiled. This feels right. He continued to pour essence into the ancient armor and watched as it slowly returned to its intended state. And then, it was finally whole once again. With a content sigh, Sunny removed his hands from the breastplate of the onyx armor and retrieved the shadow essence back into his body. After the memory turned back into stone, he dismissed it. After that, not wasting any time, Sunny dove into the soul sea, walked to stand between the 2 shadow cores, and summoned the memory down. As soon as the silhouette of the ancient armor appeared from the sphere of light, he glanced at the runes surrounding it. Come on, be good, be great. I've waited for this moment for so long. He read the first string of runes. Memory, Mantle of the Underworld. Whoa, sounds awesome. But, Underworld, that word again. One of Saint's abilities was called Underworld Armament. Her own runes also described the creator of the living statues as residing in the cavernous halls of a dark domain, as well as being the last child of the unknown. Was Saint made by the ruler of the underworld, or something? Sunny shivered slightly, then glanced at the intricate black armor with a solemn expression. Well, if her creator was indeed one of the 7 demons and a sibling to Weaver, the demon of fate, then ruling the underworld might not have been out of the question. Shaking his head, Sunny returned to reading the runes. Memory rank, Ascended, Memory tier, V, Memory type, Armor, Memory description. Vowing to never look upon the goddess of the black skies again, the prideful demon retreated into the darkness beneath an unassailable mountain chain. He wasn't the first to lead his army against the gods. However, he was the first to shed their blood, as well as learn the secrets of his own. Lead an army against the gods. When teacher Julius mentioned that demons had enough power to wage war against the heavens, Sunny had thought of it as a figure of speech. But maybe it was not. Perhaps a few of them had really tried. And what was that about the secrets of the blood? Endless questions, like always. Shaking his head again, Sunny turned away from the description and continued to read. Memory enchantments. Living stone, feather of truth, stalwart, underworld armament, prince of the underworld. Sunny stared at the long list of enchantments for a while, his heart beating wildly in his chest. Can't be. Living stone enchantment description. This armor can repair itself while being worn. Feather of truth enchantment description. The weight of this armor can be changed at will. Stalwart enchantment description. This armor provides extremely high protection against physical attacks, high protection against elemental attacks, and a moderate amount of protection against mind and soul attacks. Underworld armament enchantment description. This armor can accommodate a charm memory to inherit and enhance its enchantments. Prince of the Underworld enchantment description. This armor grows stronger according to the amount of opponents its wielder defeats. Vanquished foes. 1,213 6,000ths. Sunny remained silent for a while. His dark room, which was situated deep underground, was silent for a long time. After a while, he shifted slightly and said in a low voice. Well, I'll be damned. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 378 to 378, A New Beginning. 1,422 words. Sunny sat in the darkness for a while, thinking. At first, he wanted to immediately put on his new magnificent onyx armor, but then dismissed that idea. There would be time later. For now, he was too tired. The effects of the stimulant were slowly wearing off, and he had spent too much shadow essence already. He did, however, note a few things about the mantle of the underworld. The first fact he noticed was that it shared 2 enchantments with Saint. However, there were subtle, but important differences between the versions of stalwart and underworld armament possessed by the onyx armor and the taciturn demon. The memory offered better protection against physical and elemental attacks, but lacked the complete immunity to mind and soul attacks, possessing a moderate amount of protection against those rare and fearsome types of damage instead. Overall, this was an advantageous trade-off, since most nightmare creatures relied on more common ways of destroying awakened. Unless they didn't. The more interesting difference, however, was hidden in the description of the underworld armament. While Saint's armor could accommodate a charm memory to inherit its enchantments, the mantle of the underworld could both inherit and enhance them. Just one word made for so much difference. Sunny couldn't wait to explore this subtle trait of his new memory. Livingstone and Feather of Truth, meanwhile, were pretty obvious. That didn't mean, however, that these enchantments did not have a lot to offer. He could already see many interesting ways to apply both in battle. The downside was that both were active enchantments, and as such, would require a constant flow of essence to function. What's worse, the armor couldn't even be used without activating the first one. But the most interesting enchantment was, without a doubt, Prince of the Underworld. A growing memory. Pondering about that strange and miraculous enchantment, Sunny couldn't help but think about the first Lord of the Bright Castle, who had supposedly been the first master of the mantle of the underworld. What tier and rank was the onyx armor when he had first found it? How many of the vanquished foes had been defeated by his hand? Was the mantle of the underworld one of the reasons for his legendary achievements? For the longest time, Sunny had wondered about how an ascended memory of the 6th tier had ended up in the hands of humans in the Dark City. It had to have come from destroying a fallen terror, or so he had thought. Now, there were other possibilities. But all these questions were doomed to be left unanswered. Sadly, the First Lord and his companions had taken the answers with them to the grave. Remembering the lonely cairn in the Hollow Mountains, Sunny sighed. Then, his thoughts wandered to something else. The goddess of the black skies, Storm God. Teacher Julius had described Storm God as being the deity of the depths, of the oceans, of darkness, stars, travel, guidance, and disaster. He also said that the gender of the gods was subject to change. Stars, darkness, and storms were somewhat related to black skies. Frowning, Sunny remembered the runes describing the mantle of the underworld. Indeed, black skies could also be translated as skies covered by storm clouds, or the night sky. Interesting, translating the runes reminded him of something. Opening his communicator, Sunny found a note he made during his conversation with Effie and Kai. Their true names were written down in runic language. Nightingale. Kai's true name was pretty simple to understand, but the spell chose to interpret it rather creatively. Even though Sunny had no idea if the dream realm had actual nightingales, the runes described a pretty similar bird, probably. Translated literally, they meant sings beautifully from the night skies, which could mean either enchanting siren of the night, or simply a nocturnal bird. Effie's true name was more straightforward, but also far more morbid. Raised by wolves could mean just that, but a more direct translation had a different meaning. Born from wolves, or born from being eaten alive. Sunny shivered, then deactivated the communicator and closed his eyes for a second. There was one more thing he could do. Summoning the runes once again, he found the description of Weaver's Mask in red. Memory enchantments, Mantle of Lies, simple trick. Now that he was an awakened, he could try to activate the mysterious enchantment marked by 3 question marks. Even if all of his essence would be only enough to keep it working for a split second, he could. But he was reluctant to. Sunny knew nothing about the enchantment, but from the boundless, inconceivable pattern of the mosque's weave, he got a feeling that it was somehow connected to eyes, vision, and sight. He suspected that the vile thieving bird was a cursed devil, at least. And it had been driven mad by just one glance at the reflection in the Weaver's eye. Would something similar happen to him? There were things, after all, that humans weren't meant to see. Even God struggled with looking at some truths, it seemed. Single quote ... No, not now. Sunny was somewhat willing to risk it, but doing so right now would have been really unwise. What if he passed out from shock? That would transport him to a random spot in the dream realm, and knowing his luck, that spot would be populated by horrors beyond imagination. With a sigh, he dismissed the runes and took out another stimulant patch. Some other day, when I am much, much stronger. With that, he removed the old patch and put another one in its place. Time to put all I learned together and make the final decision. What should I choose? Stability or danger? Safer road, or an unknown path? 2 days later, Sunny was sitting on a bench opposite the entrance to the Academy Hospital complex with a cup of bitter dark coffee in his hand. In his other hand, he was holding a slit communicator. Taking a sip of the terrible drink, Sunny grimaced, then lingered for a few moments and sighed. Finally, he pressed the call button to contact Master Jet. She answered after a couple of seconds. Her voice sounded a little tense, and there were strange, barely audible whispers mixing with the background noise of the call. Awakened Sunless. What? Wait, give me a second. Something crackled violently, and in the next moment, the background noise was gone. Much better. So, have you decided? Sunny took another sip of coffee and said. Yeah. He hesitated for a bit, then added. As far as joining the legacy clans or the government, I've decided against it. I don't know enough and have no leverage to ensure a good deal. Plus, that option will remain open for me in the future even if I stay independent for now. The reverse, however, won't necessarily be true. In any case, it's a serious matter, one that should not be decided upon in a span of just a few days, while suffering from sleep deprivation and stimulant abuse, to boot. Master Jet turned on the video function of the call and smiled. The smile was bright and beautiful, but Sunny couldn't help but notice that right behind her, something was currently on fire. Makes sense. So then, which citadel? That was the real question. While Sunny decided to remain independent for now, while leaving himself an opportunity to join a powerful faction later, his choice of an anchor was going to limit which factions he would be able to interact with later on. He was silent for a bit, then said, Clan Valor Territory. Master Jet nodded. Solid choice. Bastion, or a smaller citadel. Sunny drank some more coffee, then spoke the name of the citadel he had chosen into the communicator. Jet's eyes widened slightly. She didn't say anything for a while, then asked with a bit of surprise in her voice. Are you absolutely sure? He nodded. Yeah, I thought about it long and hard. Master Jet stared at him with a slight frown for a few moments, then shrugged. Well, okay then, but, that might take a couple of days to arrange. The place is too far north, and there's not a lot of saints in those parts. But I'll find a way. Sunny smiled. Thanks, I really owe you one. She smiled in response and then winked at him. Be careful with what you say, Sunless. I might just take you up on the offer and come knocking on your door one day, asking for a favor. He took a sip of coffee and shrugged. Sure, no problem. Oh, and call me Sunny, please. Everyone does. Master Jet blinked a couple of times, then grinned. Alright, turning away from the camera, she quickly glanced at something beyond the screen, and then added. Quote. Chain dials, good luck, Sunny, I hear it's a real hell. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave, Chapter 379 to 379, Chain Dials. 1015 words. In the vast empty darkness, myriads of distant stars were shimmering with ethereal light. The vista of the night sky was boundless and stark, full of promise and mystery. Above it was another sky, this one blue and bright, full of sunlight and gentle winds. White clouds flowed across it, telling enchanting stories with their movement and shapes. Between the bright sky and the dark sky, an island floated in the air. It was surrounded by freely levitating pieces of rock and ancient masonry, its surface awash in the soft radiance of the sun, its underbelly veiled by impenetrable darkness. Several gargantuan chains stretched away from the island, cracking thunderously as it slowly rose and fell. The clangor of iron was almost loud enough to drown Sunny's voice, almost. Quote. Arg, drop dead, bastard, damn you, crap. Sunny had a good reason to be screaming bloody murder, because he was seconds away from being eaten alive. Near the edge of the flying island, where the forest covering its surface made way for a narrow expanse of patchy grass, a massive wolf-like beast was currently trying to swallow him whole. The nightmare creature was the size of a small truck, with fur as tough as steel wire and a long, terrifying muzzle. Its jaws were wide enough to bite a human in half, and strong enough to crush both bones and armor into dust. Currently, those jaws were trying to close on Sunny, and the only thing preventing them from doing so were his hands. He held the upper jaw of the beast with one, and the lower jaw with another, trying with all his strength to keep them open. His muscles felt as though they were about to explode. The abomination was also trying to bite down on the hateful human with all of its tremendous might, but for the moment neither of them could overpower the other. It was just a matter of time, though. Sunny was burning through his essence to augment his physical strength, and those reserves were not endless. When the well of power ran dry, he would lose this contest. Not good. About 2 months had passed after he had chosen to come to this place, and now, Sunny was starting to seriously doubt his decision. Why didn't he just go to Bastion? He would be safe and sound behind its walls right now, maybe even in the embrace of a beautiful. As though trying to add insult to injury, the nightmare creature interrupted his thought by letting out a deafening growl and doubling its efforts to devour him. Sunny felt a putrid wind brush past his face and grimaced miserably. The stench coming out of the beast's maw was unbearable. Just, don't faint. His hands trembled, and the terrible fangs of the beast came a few centimeters closer to sinking into his flesh. Sunny gritted his teeth, and then yelled, Saint, a little help here, damn it. But the taciturn demon was nowhere to be seen. She was a good couple 100 meters away, standing atop a low hill. Sunny groaned and tried to push the jaws of the abomination away, but it was useless. The damn creature was just too strong. A few seconds later, though, something hissed past his shoulders, and 2 menacing black arrows sunk into the feral eyes of the beast. They arrived almost simultaneously. Thanks. Using the momentary shudder that ran through the wolf's body, Sunny pushed the jaws sideways, allowed them to close with a loud crack, and poured as much essence as he could into a vicious throw. The massive body of the nightmare creature flew for good 10 meters and crashed into a trunk of an ancient oak, plowing straight through and turning it into splinters. Sunny fell to his knees and drew in a shaky breath. Then, he quickly glanced back. Far in the distance, a graceful dark silhouette was outlined against the bright sky. Saint held a powerful memory bow in her hands, its limbs made out of horn and polished black wood. 2 ruby eyes burned behind the visor of her helmet, and a crimson coral gem was set into the center of her obsidian breastplate. Nice shots. She wouldn't be able to help him any further, though, at least not for a dozen seconds. Sunny was pretty sure that the shadow had spent all of her arrows while they were fighting with the pack, and now, she had to dismiss and summon them anew. At least the leader of the monstrous wolves was now blind, probably. Not that it was going to stop the bastard. The nightmare creature was already rising from the ground, howling furiously. Curse you. Panting, Sunny crawled a few steps and picked up the midnight shard. The austere Tachi was as sharp and deadly as ever. The problem was, that the last remaining abomination was clearly of the fallen rank, so the stalwart blade was having trouble breaking through its hide. Still, Sunny had to work with what he had. Making sure that the sun was behind him, he stood up and leaned on his sword, watching tiredly as the massive beast turned its ugly head and faced him. The dreadful wolf lowered its muzzle to the ground, then growled with murderous rage. Bits of saliva flew from its maw and fell to the ground. Then, pushing with its mighty hind legs, the nightmare creature lunged at Sunny. Covering the distance between them in an instant, the beast brought its terrible jaws on the tiny human once again, and bit on emptiness. In the place where Sunny stood just a moment ago, there was now nothing but air, light, and shadows. Appearing from the nightmare creature's own shadow, Sunny dove between its hind legs and thrust the midnight shard upward, aiming at the soft belly of the fearsome beast. The Tachi pierced the pale skin without much problem and sunk into the flesh of the abomination. As blood poured to the ground, the creature staggered and fell. A low whine escaped from its mouth. Very soon, it was all over. Falling onto the ground in complete exhaustion, Sunny tried to catch his breath and listen to the silence. Soon, he heard the sweet sound of the spell whispering. You have slain a fallen monster, Dread Wolf. Opening square bracket ... Your shadow grows stronger. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave, Chapter 380 to 380, above and below. 1,169 words. Sunny lay still for a while, then summoned the runes and looked at the dreadful number. Shadow fragments, 197 2,000ths. He sighed. The task of pursuing power had turned out to be much more difficult than he had anticipated, and for one simple reason, after becoming an awakened, he now received fewer fragments from killing nightmare creatures. If before he could get 2 by slaying an awakened beast, now it was 1. If before he could receive 4 by slaying a fallen beast, now it was 2. What's worse, his hopes of growing strong by hunting down scores of dormant creatures had been mercilessly crushed, because he didn't receive any fragments from killing those weaker than him at all. Which was a real disappointment. Who didn't love punching down? Sunny was at the very bottom of the power structure for most of his life, so he had been really looking forward to having an opportunity to bully something weaker than him, for a change. Alas, it had turned out to be a waste of his time. Of course, Sunny had also become tremendously more powerful. He could handle himself in a fight with fallen beasts, and even monsters, especially with the help of Saint. That was the only reason why he had not fallen off behind Nephis, who was still alive somewhere in the dream realm, and growing more powerful with each day. He had not managed to diminish the gap between them by a lot, but at least he was not worse off than at the start of this. Thinking of changing star, Sunny looked into the distance. A somber expression appeared on his face. Single quote ... Think about something else. There was only one bright side to all of this. While dormant creatures did not bring him any shadow fragments, they did bring him memories. And those memories could be fed to Saint. Her own counter now showed. Shadow fragments, 157 200ths. Not bad. A low, eerie sound of giant iron links scraping against each other interrupted his thoughts. The island Sunny was currently on seemed to have entered the ascending phase, so his time here was running short. Standing up with a sigh, Sunny summoned the moonlight shard and walked over to the corpse of the dread wolf. He had to retrieve the soul shards before it was too late. The Chained Isles were a strange place. Situated at the very north of the territories claimed by humans, they bordered the Hollow Mountains. That was one of the reasons why Sunny had chosen that region as his hunting grounds. But it wasn't the only one. The whole region consisted of numerous islands that somehow floated in the air, connected to each other by gargantuan iron chains. It was mostly unexplored, and the awakened population here was not very large. Notably, there were not a lot of masters and saints here, especially those associated with the legacy clans. Be it great or lesser. What the Chained Island had in abundance, instead, were the nightmare creatures of all kinds, from dormant ones, to awakened, fallen, and terrifying corrupted abominations. Each island had its own menagerie of horrors, and the level of threat differed from one to another. Most were utterly deadly, though, much more deadly than an average awakened was supposed to be able to handle. But Sunny was not an average awakened. To him, this was a perfect hunting ground, a place where he could sharpen his blade without being seen by those who serve the sovereigns. Or at least he had thought that way, at the start. Right now, he was starting to suspect that it was more of a place where he could die terribly without being seen by anyone who would have been able to help. Just like Master Jet said, the Chained Islands were a hellish land. And not only because of the nightmare creatures. The place itself was capable of killing a person, or, rather, its sky could. High above the floating island, there was the usual sky with the sun, the moon, and beautiful stars that shined brightly at night. However, there was another sky in this strange land, the one that was below the islands. It was always dark, and the ethereal lights burning at an unimaginable distance in its vast expanse only looked like the stars. No one really knew what they were. The only thing that humans knew was that the sky below was seemingly endless. On his first day on the Isles, Sunny had asked what was down there. The answer he received was simple. Nothing. Descending into the below was not immediately dangerous, but there was nothing there. Some crazy daredevil had once fought his way through the hunting grounds of nightmare creatures that dwelled beneath the islands and spent a whole week flying straight down. He had to turn back, eventually, because out there in the boundless darkness, his mind began to show signs of breaking apart. Even the winged echo he used to descend into the below had almost gone insane. But other than being absolutely empty, the sky below did not seem to pose a threat. Flying above the Chained Isles, however, was rather deadly. The higher one went, the more crushing their weight would become, until they would either fall down, or their body would simply implode. That was why every human on the Chained Isles knew to pay attention to the sound of rattling chains. Every island in the region went through cycles of ascending and descending, and as they rose too high, the pressure on their surface grew tremendously, to the point where it was impossible to move. Or breathe. Ideally, Sunny had to get off the ascending island before that happened. He should not have been lingering to retrieve the soul shards from the corpses of the monstrous wolves he and Saint had killed, really. But, his eyes glistened with avarice. Soul shards meant money, and if there was one thing Sunny really enjoyed, it was making money. No amount was ever enough. An independent awakened like him had a lot of expenses. Fine, it's fine, I'll be off this thing in no time. He quickly cut the dead beasts apart and fished out the soul shards from inside their bodies. Hiding the beautiful crystals in his pack, Sunny hesitated for a little, then sent his essence flowing and tossed the first corpse off the edge of the island. He was planning to come back here soon, and leaving so much meat lying around could make the future visit rather problematic. Sunny only had one more carcass to dispose of when he suddenly noticed a swift silhouette descending from the skies. Commanding Saint to hide herself in the shadows, he summoned the midnight shard and looked up tensely. Single quote ... What the hell? Surrounded by a halo of sunlight, a majestic griffin was quickly approaching the island. At first, Sunny assumed that it was a nightmare creature, but then noticed a human figure on the monster's back. A human rider meant that the magnificent griffin was an echo. Sunny's face grew dim. Very few people could have such an echo on the Chained Isles. And out of those, he was pretty sure that he knew the identity of the unwelcome visitor. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave, Chapter 381 to 381, Roan of White Feather. 979 words. The griffin folded its white wings and dove down, then opened them up near the ground to slow its fall. Sunny raised his hand to cover his eyes from the dust that was sent into the air by the powerful gust of wind. Single quote ... Strong. The mighty beast shone with ethereal light and disintegrated into a rain of sparks, letting the rider land nimbly on the ground. He regained his balance swiftly and straightened, then turned to Sunny. The man in front of him was tall and had broad, powerful shoulders. He was wearing a light armor crafted from the adamantine scales of an unknown monster, with a blue scarf wrapped carelessly around his neck. His hair was the color of straw, as was his short beard. The stranger's eyes were bright blue, and dangerously attentive. Sunny stared at the man for a moment, then bowed respectfully, hiding his face in the process. Master Roan. Indeed, the man in front of him was none other than Ascended Roan of the White Feather clan, one of the only 3 masters on the Chained Isles. Well, there were probably only 3. Unlike the Forgotten Shore, this region of the Dream Realm had several gateways. 2 were found, conquered, and turned into citadels by humans. Both Sunny and Master Roan, as well as pretty much everyone else on the Chained Isles, belonged to one of them, the Sanctuary of Noctis. That citadel was ruled by the White Feather clan, which was one of the vassal clans to the Great Clan Valor. The second citadel was rather mysterious. It was situated at the very edge of the region, near the dreaded Hollow Mountains, and belonged to Valor itself. Only those in direct service to the Great Clan were anchored at its gateway, so Sunny had no idea what went on there, and how powerful the Awakened stationed at the citadel were. He did, however, know a bit about Master Roan. The man was married to the only saint on the Chained Isles, after all. Roan looked Sunny up and down, then gave him a friendly smile. Do we know each other? Sunny shook his head. No, sir, we haven't met before. I have just awakened a couple of months ago, so, I am new to the Chained Isles. The strapping master nodded and then glanced at the carcass of a fallen wolf that Sunny had failed to throw over the edge of the island in time. When Roan turned to him again, there was a measured look in his piercing blue eyes. Did you kill that beast? Sunny lingered for a few moments, then nodded. Yeah, well, I can be very lucky, on occasion. The tall man shook his head. This is a fallen beast. Ah, you must be Sunless, then. From the Forgotten Shore. Sunny smiled. Curses, he knows my name. He had nothing against the older man, but preferred to remain unknown and underestimated. Especially when dealing with legacies. Yeah, that's me. Master Roan nodded, as though everything suddenly made sense, and then briefly looked at the sky. You should know that it is dangerous to remain on an ascending island, right? Why are you still here? Sunny hesitated for a few moments, then shrugged. I was just about to leave and escape to the next one over when you appeared, sir. The tall man sighed. Yeah, that's what I figured. You've spent all your luck on that beast, though, it seems. All 3 of the island connected to this one are also ascending. You wouldn't have been able to escape even if you left on time. Sunny stared at him for a while, a sour expression appearing on his face. Single quote. Damn it. What about that beautiful griffin of yours, sir? Surely, it can bring us both away to safety. Roan grinned. He is rather beautiful, ain't he? Well, not that it matters. In theory, we can dive below the islands and escape through the sky below, but believe me, you wouldn't want to meet the things that dwell on the dark side of the Isles. Even I prefer to avoid those things. Sunny blinked. Then what do we do? The tall man laughed. I guess you're about to experience your first crushing, Sunless. Don't worry, though, the chains of this island are on the shorter side, so it won't ascend too high, well, most likely. And I'll be here to bring you back to the citadel if you pass out. Provided that we survive, of course. Great, this wasn't Sunny's first crushing, actually, and that was exactly why he didn't want to experience it again. But there was no other choice, it seemed. With a sigh, he dismissed Saint, who had been hiding in the shadows all along, and took off his pack. Then Sunny found a soft-looking patch of grass and placed it on the ground. Behind him, Master Roan dismissed his scale armor and unwrapped his scarf, then tied it around his waist. The less weight was on the human body during the crushing, the easier it was to endure, and the more chances of survival there were. However, the puppeteer's shroud was made mostly out of soft fabric, so Sunny left it on. He also wanted to neither reveal nor dismiss the soul serpent. As the giant chains groaned and rang thunderously, and the island rose higher and higher, the 2 of them lay on the grass and prepared to be crushed. Master Roan stared at Sunny's slender physique, then at his own mighty muscles, and sighed with envy. The Chained Isles was one of the very few places in the Dream Realm where being small and light was an advantage. Quote. If you feel like passing out, turn your head to the side. Wouldn't want to suffocate on your own spit or vomit, right? Sorry for being crass, kid. Sunny grimaced and thanked the older man in a suppressed voice. He was already feeling an invisible force pushing him into the ground. This is going to suck. As if answering his thoughts, the invisible force suddenly grew stronger, crashing into him like a giant hammer. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 382 to 382, The Crushing. 1012 words. Laying on the soft grass, Sunny felt his body grow heavier, and heavier still. The island continued to rise into the sunlit sky, and with each minute, the crushing pressure became slightly more unbearable. The ancient forest covering its surface bent, a rain of leaves falling to the ground. The mighty trees lowered their branches, almost as if trying to touch the ground. With a loud crack, a few weaker ones broke and plunged down, showering everything around with sharp splinters. Sunny grimaced, feeling his whole body struggle under the strain. He could still move and breathe without too much trouble, at least, for now. Soon, the island would rise high enough to make any kind of movement almost impossible. And if he was especially unlucky, it would continue to ascend, eventually making it hard to even inhale. Hopefully, the chains would draw taut long before that. The skies above the Chained Isles were beautiful, but also forbidden. Nothing could survive their crushing embrace, neither humans, nor nightmare creatures. Nor anything else. Well, except for one thing. Shifting his gaze, Sunny looked straight up and found the shape of the ivory tower drifting high above the world, wrapped in a veil of clouds. The ivory tower was the only thing that seemed to be capable of withstanding the deadly pressure of the forbidden sky. It was a tall, magnificent pagoda built out of flawlessly white material that was neither stone nor wood. The island on which it stood was very small, barely wider than the base of the tower itself, and surrounded by drifting slabs of shattered marble. 7 broken chains hung from the soil of the island, swaying as it moved. The ivory tower was visible in the sky both during the day, bathed in sunlight, and at night, glowing beautifully with the reflected radiance of the moon. No one knew what the mysterious structure was and why it remained untouched by the obliterating force that destroyed everything else that dared to rise above the Chained Isles, since no one had ever managed to withstand the ever-growing crushing to get anywhere near it. Many even believed it to be a mirage. Crap, the island on which Sunny had the misfortune of getting stuck had finally reached the highest point of its ascent and shook violently as the chains connecting it to other isles drew taut. The pressure at this height was tortuous, but not deadly. His bones were not breaking under the assault of the crushing, and he could still breathe, even if with great effort. It would have been better if Sunny could wrap the second shadow around his body, but he didn't want to appear too strong in front of Master Roan. Speaking of the devil, the mighty rider chose that exact moment to speak. His voice sounded a little strained. Hey, Sunless, can you breathe all right? Sunny gritted his teeth and struggled to speak. In the end, all he could manage was an affirmative grunt. Good, good, this is actually not that rough, as far as crushing goes. If we rose by another 100 meters, though, even I would be having a bad time. Single quote. Good to know. At this point, Sunny was regretting that they had not climbed on the griffin and dove into the sky below. The Chained Isles was a dangerous place, and the nightmare creatures living on them were fearsome and powerful beyond belief. However, the creatures living under the islands were much, much worse. Sunny had seen them from afar a couple of times, and the mere memory of those horrors was enough to send a shudder running through his entire body. Still, they could have fought their way through, probably. It would have been better than this diabolical torture, for sure. Arg, but there was nothing he could do now except grit his teeth and endure. Minute after minute, hour after hour. Sunny couldn't even think properly because of how terrible the pressure of the boundless skies was. All he could do was suffer silently and stare at the ivory tower. His shadow, on the other hand, was having a great time. It didn't move, reluctant to get noticed by Master Roan, but he could feel it stare at him gloatingly. Bastard, I'm going to wrap you around the ordinary rock and make it scream without rest for 24 hours straight. Let's see who's going to be gloating then. The shadow hesitated for a bit, then awkwardly pretended to be interested in something else and looked away. Yeah, that's right. Somewhere in the forest, another tree exploded with a loud crack. Sunny tried to turn his head to look in that direction, but it demanded too much effort. He didn't have to worry about being attacked by nightmare creatures in this helpless state, anyway. They were currently hiding in their lairs, enduring the crushing the same way he was. Who could fight under this hellish pressure? Sunny felt as if there was a mountain on his chest. Every breath demanded his utmost effort to make. His whole being ached, and his vision had become blurry. Exhausted, he closed his eyes and circulated the shadow essence through the coils of the soul serpent to keep his slowly breaking body going. Damn it, I'll be late to wake up, won't I? When were they going to call? In the morning. Such an important call, and I'm about to miss it. He was starting to feel really hurt when the blessed sound of rattling chains finally reached his ears once again. Oh, thank gods. After about 4 hours, the island had finally begun to move again, entering its descent phase. Little by little, the crushing pressure began to grow weaker. Master Roan sighed with relief by his side. The worst part is over. Just wait a little bit more, kid. You're almost there. Sunny glanced at the older man and sighed. He used to hate it when people called him kid, but not anymore, at least not as much. He just felt a little wistful. He didn't feel like a kid. Not for a long time now. Not since coming back from the Forgotten Shore. A dozen long and tortuous minutes later, the island descended enough for them to move, and then slowly stand up. The crushing was over. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 383 to 383, Cowardly Researcher. 1024 words. Sunny slowly rolled on his stomach, then rose to his knees. He was breathing heavily, and his whole body felt as if it had just gone through a meat grinder. Master Roan, on the other hand, looked almost unperturbed. The rider was already on his feet, tying the blue scarf around his neck with a relaxed expression on his face. The forest around them let out an almost human sigh of relief. The ancient trees creaked and cracked, raising their branches back toward the sun. Those that had broken remained on the ground, adding to the nearly impenetrable layer of deadfall. Sunny glanced at the older man with a bit of envy, then stood up and tried to shake off his exhaustion. After spending a few minutes resting and drinking greedily from the endless spring, he almost felt alive again. Glancing at the tall man, he asked, "How are you able to fly up there on your griffin? I mean, no offense, but that seems like something only a crazy person would do." Roan laughed. "I don't rise too high unless I really have to. Usually, you can fly above the descending islands without experiencing too much pressure. After a while, you develop a sense of how much your body can handle, and for how long." He massaged his broad shoulders and added, a note of pride in his voice. "Plus, I am a master, after all. I can withstand much more than an awakened would. You did exceptionally well, however. To be honest, I was pretty sure that I would have to abandon my patrol to bring your bleeding body back to the sanctuary at full speed, then throw it into the gateway. I guess it's true what they say about you Forgotten Shore kids." Sunny blinked a couple of times and asked cautiously, "What do they say?" The older man smiled, tough as nails, disturbingly indifferent to pain and fear, strong, almost scary. "Scary children, that was the exact phrase I heard." Sunny lingered for a few moments, then scoffed. "Indifferent to pain and fear? What nonsense. I pride myself on being a coward, as one should. What's wrong with being a coward? Fear keeps people alive, while bravery gets them killed. As for pain, no thank you. I have been beaten, burned, crushed, drowned, cut, stabbed, pierced, bitten, chewed, and gutted enough times for several lifetimes already." As Master Roan gave him a strange look, Sunny raised an eyebrow. What?" The tall man shook his head, then scratched his chin and said in a wondering tone. "No, nothing, it's just, if that is true, Sunless, then what are you doing here on the Chained Isles? Shouldn't you be having a nice time in a safe place like Bastion?" Sunny looked away in embarrassment, then coughed. There are several reasons for that, actually. Not the least of which is that." He looked side to side, then lowered his voice and said in a gravely serious tone. "You won't believe it, but the government actually pays you money for writing down things about the Dream Realm. And since the Chained Isles are largely unexplored, they pay me premium for going around dusty ruins here and scribbling down a thing or two. I am technically a contracted researcher, believe it or not." He grinned and watched as Master Roan stared at him with an incredulous expression. After a while, the older man said, "You are a strange fellow, you know that." Sunny shrugged. Everyone knows that, I think. Anyway, don't tell anyone about what I've just said. I don't want the competition. The tall man blinked a couple of times, then smiled. No problem. Do you need me to take you back to the sanctuary? Or will you be fine returning on your own? Sunny thought for a bit, then said. I'll be fine. It's not that far. Anyway, if I make haste, I'll be back before morning and go straight back to the real world. I have business to attend to there, actually. Master Roan nodded and patted Sunny on the shoulder. All right, then I'll be on my way. It's been nice meeting you, Sunless. If you need anything in the future, don't hesitate to find me in the sanctuary. With that, he summoned his echo. A sea of white sparks appeared out of thin air and swirled, slowly turning into the figure of the mighty griffin. The winged beast towered above Sunny like a gargantuan mix between a lion, an eagle, and a pure nightmare. Slowly, it lowered its head, staring at him with two beautiful, inhuman eyes. Its beak looked about as fearsome and terrifying as that of a spire messenger. Sunny tensed a little and took a couple of steps back, prepared to dissipate into the shadows at any moment. He didn't really think that Master Roan would suddenly attack him, but being paranoid was better than being dead. The tall man summoned his armor, then easily jumped on the griffin's back and raised a fist to bid Sunny farewell. In the next moment, the echo stretched its wings and pushed itself off the ground, sending a squall of hurricane wind in all directions. Sunny struggled to remain on his feet, and then looked as the griffin flew into the distance. Slowly, a friendly expression disappeared from his face. Well, what do you know? The famed master had turned out to be a rather pleasant person. Granted, he was a legacy by marriage, and not by birth. Still, Sunny had expected to be treated with a lot more disdain and contempt, at best hidden behind a mask of false courtesy. Come to think of it, the saint governing the Chained Isles herself was pretty down to earth, if a bit cold. Not that Sunny had a lot of opportunities to interact with her after that first day when she had brought him to the sanctuary. With a sigh, he walked over to the carcass of the monstrous wolf and sent it flying over the edge of the island with a frustrated push. The corpse of the abominable beast plummeted down and soon disappeared into the darkness of the sky below. Making sure that nothing appeared from beneath the island to snatch it, Sunny lingered on the edge for a couple of minutes, then sighed. And jumped into the bottomless abyss himself. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 384 to 384, Traversing the Islands. 1096 words. Falling through the boundless blue skies with the wind whistling in his ears, Sunny threw his hands to the sides and summoned the dark wing. As the translucent memory weaved itself from light behind his back, he shifted his weight and allowed the air resistance to push him off course, effectively turning left. A few seconds after that, he activated the enchantment of his cloak and slowed down his fall, simultaneously turning the downward momentum into a forward push. In these past 2 months, Sunny had become somewhat proficient in navigating the sky. Cutting a smooth arc in the air, he swiftly approached one of the gargantuan chains connecting the forest island to another, flew above it for a few minutes, and landed nimbly on one of the massive links. The giant chain swayed lightly beneath his feet. Somewhere behind him, it rose and merged with the soil of the island. In front of him, there was a vast expanse of empty heavens. Here on the border to the sky below, it was currently twilight. The chain stretched into the distance, disappearing into the darkness of the void a few hundred meters away. As the dark wing turned from a blur back into a transparent cloak, Sunny sighed and walked forward. Each link of the heavenly chain was as wide as a road, so he didn't need to be afraid of falling off. Approaching the connection between two links, Sunny either jumped down or glided up to the next one. Walking across the length of the chain that was drawn between the bottomless abyss below and the boundless sky above, he soon left the light of the sun behind and entered into the eternal darkness of the below. Here, there was no wind and no sound, only silence. If not for the swaying of the chain, Sunny would have thought that he had entered a completely new world. A myriad of ghostly lights were burning somewhere far below, pretending to be stars. Making sure that no one was watching him, Sunny lingered for a few moments, and then dove into the iron surface of the chain. His body turned into an incorporeal shadow and merged with the darkness enshrouding it. Here in the sky below, he was in his natural element, after all. Sunny couldn't travel through the empty darkness itself, but the chains were covered by an impenetrable veil of shadows. He could swim through them for as long as he had essence to spare, safe from the terrible creatures that lived on the dark side of the Chained Isles. Rushing forward with terrible speed, Sunny slid over the surface of the chain and flew through the darkness like a ghost. He went faster and then faster still, circling around the chain several times and leaving the forest island far behind. Covering the distance to the next isle in mere minutes, he escaped from the shadows the moment the sunlight touched the iron chain once again and shot upward in a spin. The dark wing turned into a blur, pushing him even further up. Sunny soared above the floating island and then glided smoothly to its surface, landing on solid ground with a light step. This one was much different from the one where he had fought the monstrous wolves. Instead of a forest of twisted trees, the isle was covered by jagged rocks, with an ancient ruin standing lonesomely in its center. Sunny had explored the massive structure already, and wasn't interested in visiting it again. Jumping from one shadow to another, he avoided the nightmare creatures populating the island and soon approached its other edge. Technically, from here, he only needed to cross 2 more isles to reach the sanctuary. However, one of those isles was home to a dreadful and utterly terrifying corrupted monster, so he was going to have to make a big detour. Sunny looked at the sun, and then jumped off the edge once again. Just like that, he traveled from one island to another for a few hours. When possible, Sunny turned into a shadow and rushed along the lengths of heavenly chains, then emerged from the darkness and traversed the islands themselves on foot. Each island was different from another. Some were desolate and bleak, some covered by grass and vegetation. One was full of beautiful white flowers, while another hid a clear, tranquil lake. A few were covered by ash and flames, while several were covered by the ruins that some ancient civilization had left behind. If there was one thing that united all of them, it was that each was dangerous in its own way. The desolate islands were home to swarms of monstrous, gluttonous ants. The grass covered the maws of giant abominations that hid beneath, waiting for prey to step into their trap. The vegetation was predatory and deadly if one wasn't careful to not get too close. The beautiful white flowers could put a person to sleep from which they would never wake up. The tranquil lake was home to a creature so terrifying that Sunny did not even dare to approach its clear waters. And these ones were on the safer side, as far as the Chained Isles went. Due to their proximity to the sanctuary, they were well explored, and anything dangerous enough to pose threat to the citadel had long been destroyed by Saint Tears herself. Sunny had been to these islands already, too, so he knew his way around them. Each was either descending or ascending. The former were easier to cross, while the latter forced him to walk while suffering from the early stages of the crushing. If an island he wanted to use was too high, Sunny had to change his plan and seek out another way. After a while, his reserve of shadow essence became dangerously low. Knowing that he will have to make a stop, Sunny chose a relatively safe island and headed toward it. Gliding to the surface, Sunny tiredly dismissed the dark wing and looked around. The island he was currently standing on was rather close to the sanctuary, and usually empty of any nightmare creatures. However, it was wise to make sure. Sending his shadows in different directions to scout for potential danger, Sunny sat on the ground and summoned the endless spring. When his thirst was satiated, he crossed his legs, put his hands on his knees, and closed his eyes, concentrating on the coils of the soul serpent. With a part of his mind observing the world through the shadows and another concentrated on hastening the accumulation of shadow essence, he meditated for a while and then suddenly opened his eyes. One of the shadows had noticed something interesting. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 385 to 385, Iron Hand Island. 1079 words. The island Sunny was resting on was a strange one. It was rather large and covered in soft grass, with ancient stone columns protruding from the ground here and there. Most of them had long toppled and been shattered to pieces by some unknown disaster. The ground itself was full of depressions and generally uneven, as if it had served as a battlefield for giants once. The reason why Sunny had come up with such a metaphor was not coincidental. The main feature of the island was situated at its center, and appeared to be a giant, rusty metal hand. Hence, the isle was unimaginatively called the Iron Hand Island. It was well known to the awakened anchored in the sanctuary because very few nightmare creatures ever came here, and thus, many humans used it to rest during their journeys. However, today, Sunny wasn't the only visitor to the peaceful island. A rather ugly monstrosity lay dead in the shadow of the giant iron hand, its blood forming a large pool. It had a body like that of a snake, two powerful hands protruding from a human-like torso, a head with a long and toothy muzzle, and two leathery wings. From the looks of it, the creature had landed on the island due to heavy injuries, and then succumbed to the most recent crushing. Its body seemed broken and flattened, with sharp bone splinters protruding from the torn scales. Sunny's interest was naturally piqued, because it wasn't every day that he stumbled on free soul shards. Additionally, and more intriguing, the shadow had noticed something glinting on the ground near one of the abomination's hands. Standing up, Sunny looked around, and then headed to the center of the island. Soon, he reached the rusty metal arm and dove into the shadows, emerging on top of it. Standing a good 10 meters above the ground, he stared at the carcass of the dead nightmare creature to make sure that the shadow didn't miss anything. Everything seemed to be fine. With a shrug, Sunny jumped down and landed softly on the grass near the massive monster. Walking around it, he approached the spot where the abomination's hand lay on the ground, its 5 long fingers ending in terrifying claws. Gee, you were a scary one, weren't you? He didn't need to wonder about who had done the monster in. On the chained isles, nightmare creatures constantly fought each other. Winged ones like this one were often caught by the inhabitants of the dark side, torn to pieces, and devoured. This one had been relatively lucky, all things considered. Bending down, Sunny picked up the small object that seemed to have fallen out of the creature's hand and stared at it with a dubious expression. A coin. Indeed, he was holding a heavy golden coin. Which didn't make any sense. Nightmare creatures were not exactly known for participating in commerce, and humans did not use coins. If they needed to trade, they either bartered with suitable items or used credits. Of course, credits didn't exist in the dream realm, but the transaction would be honored when both parties returned to the real world. So where could a gold coin come from? Sunny stared at the coin for a while, then turned it around. There was a depiction of an archaic ship on one of its sides, with a tall mast that had an actual tree growing around it. A beautiful human face stared at him from the other side, a carefree smile on its lips. The person had high cheekbones, long hair, and exquisite features. Sunny couldn't say if they were a man or a woman, just that they seemed rather charming. There was a crescent moon drawn on their forehead, and, well, that was about it. Sunny studied the coin some more, and then thought despondently. That thing is definitely cursed, right? It just had to be. What else was he supposed to think after finding a mysterious coin near the corpse of a monster that had died a violent death? But it didn't seem to be cursed. Sunny had a rather good intuition about these things. He also had the sight of a person who had inherited a part of Weaver's forbidden lineage. Looking under the surface of the coin, Sunny expected to see a malevolent spell weave, or at least something strange, but there was nothing. From the looks of it, the coin was just a coin. The only strangeness about it was that it seemed a little bit warm to the touch. Teacher Julius would have been delighted if he brought him a sketch of a genuine Dream Realm coin. Cultural artifacts like this were few and far between. It wouldn't result in Sunny receiving any contribution points, but the old man was easy to please. With a shrug, Sunny shoved the coin into his pack and turned to the dead monster. Let's see how many shards you're hiding, ugly lizard. He summoned the moonlight shard, enhanced it with 2 shadows, and cut into the tough hide of the nightmare creature. For a while, luck was on his side. He quickly retrieved 2 bright soul shards, so quickly, in fact, that Sunny grew sure that there had to be a third one inside the carcass. A demon, that was where his luck ended. The body of the demon was too heavily damaged, so when he tried to fish out the third crystal, its stomach burst open and spilled its contents all over the ground. Arg, curses. Sunny was so disgusted by the idea of being doused in the putrid slimy mass that he instinctively teleported a few meters away. Then, he tilted his head and stared down. Covered in repulsive, acidic liquid, 3 more coins, as well as something that resembled a piece of a wooden chest, lay in the quickly melting grass. Did this guy try to eat a treasure chest? Sunny shook his head, walked around the disgusting mess, and quickly retrieved the last soul shard. Since golden coins were rather useless to him and he already had one to sketch, he had no intention of retrieving the rest. No thank you. By that time, he had recovered enough shadow essence to return to the sanctuary, so nothing was holding him on the island anymore. Throwing one last look at the giant metal hand and wondering what terrible strike could have separated it from the rest of the theoretical giant, he turned away and walked toward the edge of the island. The sun was already setting, so he didn't have a lot of time left to return to the citadel and use the gateway before the morning came. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 386 to 386, Sanctuary of Noctis. 1095 words. Soon, Sunny was walking on the last chain he had to traverse as he approached the Sanctuary of Noctis. By then, it was already night. Up above, the pale disk of the crescent moon shone softly, its light reflecting off the white walls of the ivory tower. Countless stars shimmered on the dark velvet tapestry of the night sky. Without the light pollution that the giant city where Sunny had grown up produced, they were beautiful and bright. There had not been any stars on the forgotten shore, as well, so this sight was still new and breathtaking to him. Now that it was night, the border between the sky above and the sky below was almost invisible. The empty void beneath the isles had stars of its own, so it seemed like the reflection of the real sky during these hours. The only difference between them was that it lacked both the moon and the ethereal silhouette of a graceful white tower floating through the clouds. The chain swayed lightly as Sunny walked. He felt reluctant to use shadow step this close to the sanctuary and enjoy the sight of the night sky, the smell of clean air, and the cool embrace of the wind. So he tended to complete this last part of the return journey on foot. Even hell could be beautiful, sometimes. A few minutes later, Sunny heard the murmur of flowing water and knew that the sanctuary was already close. The citadel that served most awakened of the chained isles as home was situated on a tiny island of its own. That island, however, was rather anomalous. Unlike all others, it never rose and never fell, always remaining at a stable height, away from the tortuous pressure of the crushing. There was a grass field, and in its center, massive menhirs stood in a perfect circle, which encompassed another, smaller one. This larger circle formed the outer wall of the citadel, while the smaller one formed the inner. Inside the circle, there was a tranquil park with a pool of clear water in its middle. A path of stones led to a small island at the center of the pool, where, in the shade of an ancient tree, an altar cut from a solid piece of white marble stood. The altar had 3 special things about it. The first one was an obsidian knife that lay on its surface. The knife did not seem very special, with the exception of the fact that no one, not even saints, could lift it even by a centimeter from the altar's surface. The second special thing about the altar was that it appeared to be, itself, the gateway. One simply had to touch it to be transported back to the real world. Once anchored to it, the awakened would appear near the altar when they fell asleep in reality. The third thing was that a seemingly endless stream of water flowed from the altar, feeding the pool that surrounded it. No one knew where the water came from or why the altar produced it, just that it was cold, sweet, and safe to drink. 7 streams flowed out of the pool and eventually fell over the edges of the small island, turning into water mist in the wind. On a bright day, the whole sanctuary was surrounded by rainbows. It was the murmur of these waterfalls that Sunny had heard as he approached the citadel. Using the dark wing to glide upward and land on the soft grass of the island, he walked over to a stone post that stood nearby and rang the bronze bell that hung on it. This was to let the watchman know that he was a human and not a nightmare creature that needed to be destroyed. Soon, a whistle came out of the darkness, and Sunny walked forward on a path that led to the towering menhirs. A few minutes later, he had walked between 2 massive stones and entered the sanctuary of Noctis. No one really knew who Noctis was, and why this place was called in their honor, if that name even belonged to a living creature. It was just what the spell called this place, so humans followed suit. In any case, the space between the 2 rings of menhirs had been made into a place for the awakened to rest and recuperate between their ventures into the wild expanse of the Chained Isles. The White Feather clan had built walls to close the spaces between the standing stones, and recruited several people with useful utility aspects to make living conditions better for those who chose to come here or were sent to this region by the spell. Currently, there were about 200 awakened populating the sanctuary, which was enough to keep it functioning and safe. This late at night, most people were either sleeping, resting, or had already returned to the real world, so Sunny did not meet anyone as he headed toward his assigned living quarters. Like everybody else here, he was assigned a small room after becoming anchored to the sanctuary. It was situated near one of 2 entrances, so he didn't have to walk for a long time. Entering the room, Sunny quickly took off his pack and placed his trophies, a scattering of soul shards, a few weird-looking fruits, and the golden coin, into a chest standing near the bed. Then he threw the pack on the floor, lingered for a few moments, and left. Usually, he would have stayed until the morning and went to either the kitchens or the improvised marketplace at the park to trade the shards for memories or credits, chat with other awakened to learn the latest news and important information about the Isles, or simply relax, but today, he had to hurry to the real world. Entering the park, Sunny approached the deep pool of clear water and stepped onto the first stone of the path that led to the altar island. Soon, he was standing in front of the white altar, surrounded by the tranquil sound of rustling leaves and running water. Glancing at the obsidian dagger, Sunny resisted the urge to try and lift it. He had already done so many times before, all with no result whatsoever. Single quote ... Maybe one day, with a sigh, he took a step forward and placed his hand on the altar. The marble felt cool to the touch. In the next moment, the darkness of the night was momentarily illuminated by a flash of ethereal blue light. When it dissipated, there was no one standing under the branches of the ancient tree. Sunny had left the dream realm and returned to the real world. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads, redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 387 to 387, Withered Flowers. 1057 words. Sunny opened his eyes in the cool cradle of the sleeping pod. The lid was already sliding away, and the lights in the room were gradually turning brighter. The panoramic wall in front of him opened to a view of one of the academy parks. The eastern horizon was already painted lilac by the rising sun, but the world was still shrouded in darkness. Single quote ... Made it. With a sigh, he rose from the pod and lowered his feet to the cold floor. These first moments after leaving the dream realm were still strange to him. It just seemed weird to be able to escape it so easily, without having to fight through a sea of monsters and struggle against terror, desperation, and pain. How could something so meaningful be so simple? And yet, it was. In the past 2 months, coming and going from the dream realm had almost become a routine for him. Not that he had done it as often as most awakened did. Standing up, Sunny grimaced, then massaged his shoulders and glanced at the sleeping pod darkly. Now that he was an awakened, the academy had granted him a personal living space in one of the dormitories. These quarters were much the same as the room he had lived in during his preparations to enter the dream realm for the first time, but with one significant difference: there was a smaller room adjacent to the main one, housing a humble meditation space and an individual sleeping pod. The problem was, that pod was not at all as advanced and state-of-the-art as the ones used for the sleepers. It did its job fine as long as an awakened remained in the dream realm for about 8 to 12 hours, as most of them did. However, Sunny was in the habit of spending much more time there. His recent adventure, for example, had lasted 3 whole days. He had to work hard to not fall behind, after all. As a result, his muscles felt sore and heavy. Circulating essence through his body to chase away the remnants of sleep, Sunny walked to the bathroom and got into the shower. As streams of water caressed his skin and flowed down the scales of the black serpent coiling around his lithe body, he sighed and closed his eyes for a moment. At least his mind felt refreshed. Visiting the dream realm was not exactly equal to good sleep, but it was somewhat similar. Mental fatigue still accumulated little by little, but it was easy to remove by meditating or actually sleeping on the other side of the gateway. Few awakened ever did, however, since no place there was really completely safe. Exiting the shower sometime later, Sunny finally felt wide awake and full of energy. He dressed himself, sat at the table, and quickly compiled a report about his recent exploration. Then, he picked up the communicator and checked its log. No missed calls, a few messages from Effie with photos of all the delicious food she was eating and several mimetic jokes of questionable nature, and a few more from Kai, describing his experiences in Bastion. Sunny waited for a bit, then sighed and put the communicator down. Time for breakfast. Commanding one of the shadows to wrap itself around his body so that he appeared like a normal person, Sunny left his room and headed out. On the way to the cafeteria, he met a few other awakened. No one paid him too much attention, though. In recent months, the images and true names of Cassie, Kai, and especially Effie had been plastered all over the media, but luckily, he had avoided becoming a poster boy for the government's insatiable propaganda machine. As the result, random strangers had no idea who he was, which suited Sunny just fine. Entering the cafeteria, he got himself a full tray of food, sat at one of the tables, and placed the communicator on its surface. The call was supposed to come any minute now. He enjoyed a decadently delicious breakfast in peace and quiet, glancing at the communicator from time to time. No one bothered him, and there was no danger to be worried about. A content smile found its way to his lips. Ah, life is good. Finally, the communicator rang. Sunny answered the call and listened to the respectful voice on the other side of it. Everything is ready. Wonderful. So, when can I? Oh, really? Well, great. Then I will be there at noon. Right. See you later, then. Finishing the call, he put the communicator down and stared into the distance for a long time, a strange look on his face. After receiving the contribution points for his Forgotten Shore report and making some money by selling soul shards to other awakened on the Chained Isles, Sunny had done something that he had never thought that he would be able to do in this life. He had bought a home. A nice, beautiful home in the district of the city with clean air and green lawns. And now, after several long weeks of waiting, everything was finally ready for him to move in. Looking down at his cantankerous shadow, Sunny lingered for a few moments and then smiled. Quote, I think we've made it, buddy. We really did. The person in charge of renovating his home and bringing it to the desired specifications was going to meet him there at noon, so Sunny had a few hours of free time to kill. He wandered around the parks for a bit. Now that the spring had come, the air was warm and pleasant. The melodic drip-drop of melting snow disturbed the peaceful silence of the early morning, making Sunny feel balanced and relaxed. Even the shadow seemed to enjoy this tranquil landscape. Eventually, he visited one of the kiosks scattered around the academy and spent a bit of credits to buy a bouquet of fresh flowers. Then, Sunny found himself standing in front of the hospital complex. With a sigh, he lowered his head and walked through the automatic doors. Using an elevator to reach one of the lowest levels, he passed several increasingly strict security checks and approached an unremarkable white door. Inside, it was cool and dark. Changing the withered flowers with fresh ones, he lingered for a bit, then sat on a chair that stood near the softly glowing sleeping pod. Entombed within, a young woman with silver hair was dreaming soundly, her face pale and unmoving. Quote, Hey, nephews, how have you been? Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave, Chapter 388 to 388, Vigil. 1,160 words. There was no one in the room besides the two of them. Well, Nephews wasn't really there, either. In a sense, Sunny was alone. In more senses than one, really. There were 2 small tables standing on both sides of the sleeping pod, each bearing a vase with fresh flowers. Sunny only ever changed flowers in one of the vases, while Cassie tended to the other. They had yet to bump into each other while visiting Neff after that first fateful day, though, which suited Sunny fine. He didn't really want to see the blind girl now, or ever again. Glancing at Changing Star, Sunny sighed and kept his mouth shut. He didn't know what kinds of recording equipment were installed in the room, so his one-sided conversations with Nephews had to happen in the safety of his mind. I've just returned from the Dream Realm. Spent a whole 3 days there, exploring ruins and hunting down a few nightmare creatures. My shadow fragments, well, you already know. I've been working hard to not let you leave me completely in the dust. Oh, I met a master from the White Feather clan yesterday. He seems like a nice enough guy. You would have liked him, I think. He paused for a few moments and wondered if this was considered crazy behavior, talking to a person that wasn't really there, pretending that they were. Maybe it was, but despite how much Sunny hated to admit it, he wasn't as fine and stable as he pretended to be. He was angry, guilt-ridden, and lonely. He missed Nephews much more than he had ever expected. Out there on the Forgotten Shore, she had somehow become a fundamental part of his life. It was strange to exist without her occupying a place in the same world as him. Painful. He missed Cassie, too. Or rather, the version of her that had lived in his mind before everything they had turned to ashes. He missed their friendship, their camaraderie, their trust in each other. Things that had been broken and lost. Sunny sighed. You know, these days I often think about the time we spent in the labyrinth. The three of us. It was a simpler time, don't you think? A wonderful time. It seemed so terrible back then, but now, I miss it a lot. I wonder if you do, too. He grimaced, then looked away. Anyway, what else? Oh, that house I bought is ready. Kai and Effie are doing fine. They are both very busy, though. I hear that Saz is doing well, too. She had become the leader of those Forgotten Shore Awakened who remained independent. People are calling them the Firekeepers. Funny, right? Sunny lingered for a while, gathering his thoughts. Single quote. I have visited your mom, by the way. I remember that you didn't like the thought of her being alone, so I went to see her. She is fine, too. Well, I mean, you know. For a hollow. Oh, and the funniest part. He looked around, then thought. Do you remember how you told us that you wanted to dye your hair? You won't believe it, but I actually bought a little memory that allows me to change the color of my hair at will. Not because of you, it's just something that I needed for a thing I'm about to do. Still, I think that it's sort of hilarious. Neffy's remained still and absent, her ivory face looking lifeless in the white glow of the sleeping pod. He gritted his teeth. Single quote. Where are you? How are you doing? Are you hurt? Are you fucking happy? I imagine that you would be, free of everything, with nothing to do but slaughter nightmare creatures and battle against the thing you hate the most. Sunny looked down and clenched his fists, then remained still for a long time. Are you coming back? There was no answer. He sat by Changing Star's side for a while, staring at her still face. Then, he nodded heavily and stood up. All right, figures. I'll see you later, then. With that, Sunny turned around and left. Exiting the academy, Sunny lingered for a bit, then turned around and looked back. The massive red gates looked very different from how they used to, back when he and Neffys walked through them 16 months ago. The space in front of them had been empty then, but now, it was filled with tens of thousands of burning candles. These candles were an altar to Changing Star. After the survivors of the Forgotten Shore had returned to the real world, their story spread like wildfire and captured humanity's attention for a few weeks. Both the independent media and the government propaganda machine added fuel to the fire, spinning it as an inspirational epic of human resilience, heroism, and sacrifice. And Neffys, of course, was the protagonist of that epic. Most of the Forgotten Shore Awakened were her willing apostles, after all. In their hearts, she was their savior. They were also under the impression that Changing Star had become trapped in the dream realm in order to give them a chance to escape. Their voices fell into fertile soil. Neffys already had the established mythos of the Immortal Flame clan to raise her into the spotlight of glory, and with her extraordinary accomplishments on the Forgotten Shore, it only grew brighter. The thing that really elevated and exalted her, however, was something else. It was martyrdom. People loved nothing more than a martyr. Just like Sunny had said, a person had to die to become a true hero. Changing Star, however, had done something strange. She was now, somehow, neither dead nor alive, which only made the whole thing more gripping and emotional. Neffys had become a martyr without actually dying. Which was, coincidentally, very fitting, considering her clan's name. All of humanity was now entranced by the story of the last daughter of the legendary Immortal Flame clan, the heiress to two most prominent warriors in human history, who had been thrust into hell, stormed the citadel of a fallen terror that ruled it, and fought the creature off long enough for 100 sleepers to escape back to the real world, staying behind to ensure their survival. From the outside, she seemed like a paragon of humanity. Sunny didn't know who came up with the idea of placing candles near the gates of the academy, but it was rather ingenious. People seemed to believe that the Immortal Flame would not be extinguished as long as at least one candle continued to burn for Changing Star. So the academy had unexpectedly become a place of pilgrimage for thousands of humans who wished for her to do the impossible once again and return alive. The idea was so poignant that even Sunny himself had felt compelled to light a candle a couple of times. Single quote. Zealots. With a dismissive shake of his head, he turned around and walked away, leaving the sea of candles behind. None of them really knew Neffys. Only he did. She didn't need their candles to escape the dream realm. Perhaps it was the dream realm that needed help escaping from her. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 389 to 389. A place to call his own. 1053 words. Sunny spent some time in a crowded carriage of a public train. Since personal transport vehicles were rare, expensive, and demanded a special government license to purchase, most people in the city used public transportation to move around. Magnetic trains, usually simply called trams, were the cheapest and most popular form of it. During his time in the outskirts, Sunny rarely had a reason to use one, but when he did, people didn't pay him any attention. Sometimes they even went out of their way to not notice him. But now, things seemed to have changed. Sunny had his eyes closed, observing the carriage through the shadow in case there was danger. There wasn't, however. He was surprised to notice that people, especially young women, threw curious glances at him from time to time. Is the soul serpent showing? But no, his sleeves hid the coils of the shadow completely. Strange. Must be the clothes, then. Sunny had not ventured out of the academy a lot during the past 2 months, but on one of those expeditions, he had bought himself some unassuming but pricey civilian clothes. According to Kai, they were understated and stylish, whatever that meant. Sunny basically just went for the only comfortable thing the store had in dark colors. He sighed. That just shows how shallow people are. A simple change of wardrobe, and suddenly, I'm at the center of attention. Why are girls so materialistic? To be fair, many guys stared at him, too. By the time Sunny reached his stop, he was a bit flustered. Leaving the crowded train behind, he sighed with relief, hid his hands in his pockets, and walked out of the familiar tram terminal. The part of town he came to was somewhat near its center, as far removed from the outskirts as one could imagine. It was peaceful, quiet, and green. The air was almost as fresh as that of the dream realm. The houses in this district were also the opposite of the human hive Sunny was accustomed to. Weirdly, they were all very low, no more than 2 or 3 stories high. The ground itself rose and fell in artificial tiers, each street existing on its own wide terrace. Out here, the snow was already gone, revealing beautiful lawns and greenery. The whole district looked like a garden. Obviously, not everyone could allow themselves to live here. Most of the locals were either reasonably wealthy or worked for the government. However, as far as citizens went, they were not of the highest ranks. There were other, much more affluent districts in the city, and the real elites, as well as most awakened, lived there. But that was one of the things Sunny liked about this place. He could do without being around other awakened all day, every day. Or anyone, really. It took him around 15 minutes to walk from the terminal to the desired address. Of course, Sunny could have reached it much faster by jumping through the shadows, but he preferred to not use his abilities outside of the dream realm in the academy. It made him feel more human. Finally, he stopped in front of the home that was going to be his, and stared at it for a few minutes. The house in front of him was 2 stories high, with gray walls and a slanting tile roof. It had a synthwood porch, a lawn, and a big window opening to the view of a spacious living room. There was even a garage for a PTV, and a hedge fence to separate it from the neighboring homes. It was like something out of a fairy tale. Extravagant, awakened sunless, sir. Sunny was aware, of course, that a PTV had just parked nearby and that a man got out of it, approaching him from behind. He was just too consumed by the weight of the moment to show it. Turning around, he glanced at the person who called out for him. It was a short, overweight man wearing a very expensive tailored suit and an antique luxury watch. Despite his outward appearance, the man was full of confidence and had a wide, polished, professional smile plastered to his face. Sunny stared at him with a dubious expression, then said, quote, Leonard, right, the man, who was the representative of the agency responsible for outfitting Sunny's new home, nodded with enthusiasm. That's me. Ah, the fact that you have remembered my name is very flattering, sir. Really. With that, he gestured to the home and smiled. How do you like it? Sunny hesitated, then feigned indifference and shrugged. It's fine, I guess. Leonard lingered for a moment, then smiled even wider. Of course, a person of your caliber must be accustomed to much more luxurious accommodations. But I can assure you, you won't be disappointed by our work. This home might not be as high class as what you're used to, but we did everything for your specifications. Although, I must admit, your choice of location gave us a challenge, especially with the need to keep the exact nature of the modifications discreet. Sunny kept a straight face and tried to understand what the hell Leonard was talking about, and who he thought Sunny was. To be honest, when he had decided to buy a home, he just contacted Master Jet, told her where he wanted the house to be located and a couple of things he hoped to fit inside, and instead of giving him advice on how to proceed, she simply arranged everything with a couple of phone calls. And now, here he was. Meanwhile, Leonard glanced at him with a bit of curiosity, hesitated for a couple of moments, and then asked cautiously. By the way, if you don't mind me asking, sir, how does this beautiful house stack against your previous place of residence? I am interested from a purely professional standpoint, of course. Think of it as a client survey. Sunny looked at the cozy gray home, thought for a bit, and then answered honestly. Well, my previous place was about 100 times bigger, built mostly out of natural stone and marble, with antique wooden furniture and a very special secret dungeon. Oh, and security was taken care of by a fallen devil. Leonard stared at him for a while with the same wide smile. His face, however, had slowly turned gray. After a while, he coughed a couple of times and said hoarsely. Wonderful, that's wonderful, ahem. Shall we take a look inside? Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 390 to 390, Is My Castle. 1026 words. The interior of the home was tasteful and minimalist, governed by a design philosophy that seemed stylish, spacious, and a little bit empty. The first floor contained a living room, a dining room, a kitchen, a pantry, a bathroom, and a guest bedroom. Everything was furnished and fully stocked, including a refrigerator that was stuffed with all kinds of expensive food. Leonard looked around with a sense of pride and went on a long tirade about all the hidden security features the unassuming house actually possessed. There were thick plates of armored alloy hiding behind the siding panels, the wide windows were outfitted with titanium shutters that could come down at a moment's notice, and both air and water filters could withstand not only the usual environmental toxins but also most known forms of biochemical threats. Such extensive security measures might have seemed like overkill, but in fact, even mundane humans strive to turn their homes into compact fortresses. No one knew when the next gate would open, and how close to them it would be. Even though most homeowners were never going to use these protective features, having them made for a big quality of life difference. Leonard spent a weirdly long amount of time describing all the lighting fixtures his agency had installed, his voice bursting with enthusiasm. It seemed that the man had a thing about designer lamps. Sunny didn't have the heart to tell him that he would not be using any of them, most of the time. He could see perfectly well in the dark, after all. The house is connected to the city electrical grid, but there's obviously an autonomous energy source for emergencies. Spelltech, of course. Power units are easily accessible for purchase and last for a very long time. By Spelltech, he meant that the autonomous generator was built by combining modern technology with awakened powers. The power units it required had to be either recharged or created by someone with a suitable utility aspect. Devices such as this were considered to be a luxury for the commoners, but in fact, a very large part of the city's infrastructure functioned on Spelltech. Not everything in the world was created by the awakened, but almost all industries required their participation in one way or another. Even the air filtration system Sunny's mother used to assemble in an underground factory on the outskirts contained fiber grown by one of the nightmare spell carriers. That was why, while utility aspects were often useless in a fight, people who possessed them were so valued by society. Sunny asked a couple of questions about the entertainment system built into the living room, scratched the back of his head after receiving the answers, and expressed his desire to see the second floor. The second floor contained the master bedroom and two smaller ones, each with its own bathroom, and a brightly lit home office. There was also the latch to the storage space in the attic. Leonard described a few things about the furniture they chose, and then mentioned the soundproofing of the master bedroom several times, for some unknown reason. Sunny frowned and gave him a strange look. I mean, sleeping in peace and quiet is nice, but he does know that I can't sleep in the real world, right? What a strange man. Finally, they descended into the basement, which was situated deep underground, as well as being the most heavily fortified and well-protected part of the house. In a sense, this was the heart of the unassuming gray home. The whole basement was one large space, with walls, floor, and ceiling covered by heavy plates of armored ceramic alloy. This was done so that an awakened could train here without worrying about destroying their own home or alerting the neighbors. Sunny paid extra to make sure that every piece of training equipment here could survive his spars with Saint. He still remembered and mourned all the beautiful things he had lost during their previous duels. Like his favorite table, or his comfortable chair, or his pride, the basement could be isolated from the rest of the house and from the outside world, turning into a heavily fortified, impenetrable alloy box. The reason for this level of additional security stood in a small alcove at the far end of it. It was a state-of-the-art, beautiful, incredibly expensive sleeping pod, the best money could buy. Sunny walked over to it and stared at the softly illuminated, luxurious cradle for a while, then smiled. No more sore muscles. In its closed state, the pod looked like a steel monolith. As far as high-tech coffins went, this armored one was a real beauty. Sunny couldn't even call it a coffin, really. That thing was a whole sarcophagus. With its help, he would be able to spend entire months in the dream realm without subjecting his physical body to any damage. He wasn't planning on getting lost in the spell for so long, of course, but it was better to be safe than sorry. Leonard chuckled. I am not going to lie, every time I find myself in such an environment, I can't help but feel a little scared. Have you ever heard about Dracula, sir? Sunny glanced at him, then shrugged. Not really. What is that? The short man shivered. Just a legend, thankfully. Dracula was a fiend that fed on human blood and slept in a coffin underground. Hence Sunny smiled. Oh, a vampire. Yes, I've met one or two. Leonard grew pale, remained silent for a while, then squeaked. Met. Not paying him any attention, Sunny turned to the second pod that stood near the first one. This device looked similar enough to a sleeping pod to be mistaken for one, but had nothing to do with sleeping. Well, not technically. It also had a cradle and a heavy lid, but unlike Sunny's new sarcophagus, it wasn't designed to accommodate a human body for long periods of time. In fact, there was a plaque on the inside of the lid advising people against overusing the equipment and asking them to behave responsibly. It was the best available dreamscape pod, allowing one to enter the advanced virtual reality simulation that existed on the edge between technology and magic. Sunny had big plans for that thing. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 391 to 391, Dreamscape. 1213 words. Dreamscape was a place that was neither real nor a part of the dream realm, but instead existed somewhere in between. It was created and maintained by a combination of advanced modern technology and a very special aspect ability that a certain master, now already a saint, possessed. Their power had to do with illusions, and so, that was what Dreamscape was. A massive illusion that countless people could share. However, that illusion was not entirely malleable, and functioned according to a set of absolute rules. It reflected reality instead of being a complete replacement for it. As the result, a person entering it was bound by the same laws that existed in the real world. And since one of those laws was the nightmare spell, a person's aspect, abilities, memories, and echoes would function in the illusion the same way they functioned outside of it, with one important difference. One couldn't be hurt, wounded, or killed in the dreamscape. Neither memories nor echoes could be destroyed, which meant that awakened were able to battle each other there without having to risk their lives and keep the destructive force of their duels out of the real world. This application was the primary use of the dreamscape, well, in a sense. At the dawn of it, the dreamscape was mostly used by the legacy clans and the government to train elite awakened that served them, but it was quickly deemed as only being marginally useful. While such training could facilitate safe duels between the human carriers of the spell, its simulation of the nightmare creatures was not that close to reality. The illusory monsters lacked the will and mind of actual abominations, after all. So, the dreamscape had failed to become a successful training tool and was thus largely abandoned. It had, however, unexpectedly found incredible success in the entertainment segment. Those awakened that were not part of elite strike forces deemed it to be very engaging, useful, and fun. The duels in the dreamscape became very popular, and that popularity simply exploded once the company behind it came up with the idea to integrate a broadcast function into the simulation pods, thus making these duels available to a much broader audience, the mundane humans. Today, Dreamscape was a whole industry with both amateur and professional leagues, famous celebrities, and passionate fan clubs. There was even a version of it for non-awakened, with its own set of environments and adventures that allowed people to experience a facsimile of what it meant to travel across the dream realm while battling nightmare creatures. Sunny, however, wasn't interested in the fame, glory, and money that becoming a renowned Dreamscape champion could bring him. No matter how lucrative, it was just a toy, at the end of the day. He was, nevertheless, extremely interested in that toy for three very important reasons. The first reason was the anonymity that Dreamscape offered. It was all but impossible to track a person entering the illusion if they didn't wish to be tracked, which was very much to his liking. The second reason was Shadow Dance. Sunny needed to fight against a multitude of opponents skilled in wielding different weapons and using various styles to sharpen his battle art and make it, as well as the Soul Serpent, stronger. In a sense, he needed to create a library of mirrored styles to enrich his own. Was there a better place to find thousands upon thousands of awakened who were willing and ready to cross blades with him? All without having to risk his life, to boot. The third reason was rather unexpected. In fact, Sunny had stumbled upon it by pure accident. Back when he had just arrived on the Chained Isles, he secretly tested the mantle of the underworld in battles against several nightmare creatures. The onyx armor had turned out to be even more remarkable than he had anticipated, so he easily hunted down several abominations. And yet, one creature had managed to escape from him after being thoroughly defeated, mostly because of the approaching crushing. That was when he discovered how the Prince of the Underworld enchantment really worked. Its description said that the onyx armor grew stronger according to the number of opponents its wielder defeated, and it did exactly that. The enchantment didn't care whether the opponent lived or died, all that mattered was that the enemy lost. After the nightmare creature Sunny had beaten escaped, the counter of the enchantment still changed from 1215 6,000ths to 1216 6,000ths. He tested it in a battle with another abomination, bringing it to the door of death and then walking away without delivering the last blow. The counter went to 1217 6,000ths. So, Sunny hoped to kill two birds with one stone in the dreamscape, to both elevate his technique and satiate the requirements of the Prince of the Underworld with a constant stream of victories. Now that he had finally bought his own home and gained access to a sufficiently secure simulation pod, the chance to do so was finally in his grasp. But first, he needed to send Leonard away. The two of them returned to the ground floor. The short man looked around and asked with a somewhat forced smile. I hope that everything was to your liking, sir. Trying not to show how weird it was for him to be addressed as, sir, still, Sunny gave him a curt nod and answered evenly. Yes, it will do. Leonard hesitated for a few moments, then said. Good, great, ahem, would you like to subscribe to our active security service? Many awakened find it beneficial to have a dedicated security team, guarding, The short man started to give him an obviously practiced sales pitch, but under Sunny's indifferent gaze, his voice grew quieter and quieter until eventually disappearing completely. Sunny smiled slightly. I would not, Leonard. Do you really presume to be able to guard me? Leonard gulped, then shook his head. Ha, ha ha, no, of course not. What was I thinking about, even? Please forgive me, sir. He looked away, then hurried to change the subject. In any case, as you can see, the interior is rather empty. We left space for you to fit your, things. If you don't mind me asking, when are the movers arriving? Sunny stared at him, then shrugged. They're not. I don't own a lot of things, by which he meant that the clothes on his back and the stuff in his pockets were the total sum of his worldly possessions. Leonard sighed, then nodded. How profound. Indeed, people these days are too preoccupied with material possessions. They define themselves through the ownership of things, not noticing that those things actually own them. I envy your wisdom, sir. Single quote. What on earth is that guy going on about? Sunny stared at Leonard's tailored suit and antique watch with hidden envy. Those had to be expensive. The short man caught the direction of his gaze, and blushed with embarrassment. Anyway, if no one is coming, then we can conclude the deal right here and now. I wouldn't want to take too much of your precious time. They signed a few documents. All payments had been made in advance, so this was just a formality. But, despite that, completing this meaningless ritual made Sunny feel a deep and powerful emotion. In a few minutes, Leonard was gone, leaving him alone in his new home. The first home he had in many, many years. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 392 to 392, Birth of a Legend. 1,189 words. For a while, Sunny stood motionlessly in the living room. Then, he slowly wandered around the house, looking at its walls and tastefully furnished rooms. Finally, he found himself near the refrigerator and took out a glass bottle full of clear, pure water. With it in hand, Sunny walked outside and sat down on the porch. The terrace district was quiet and peaceful. The air was still cold, but the sunlight was already full of warmth, promising a vibrant spring. The wind rustled the leaves gently, and streams of meltwater murmured softly as they ran down the pavement. Sunny stared at the piece of land that he now owned and opened the glass bottle. He spent quite a while there, sipping water and looking at nothing in particular. As hours passed, several PTVs drove by. He saw a few people in clean and warm clothes. A bit later, droves of children and teenagers in school uniforms walked past, on their way home from their studies. After that, he sighed, retrieved his shadows, and went back inside. Bringing the empty bottle back to the refrigerator, he stared at it for a few moments. Inside, there was food, so much food. Enough food to last him for a month. All easily accessible, delicious, and well within his means. Before Sunny knew it, his fist slammed into the door of the refrigerator, easily piercing the thin metal sheets and turning the vegetables stored on the other side into vapor. Pieces of metal and plastic flew in the air, and the whole house trembled slightly. The refrigerator itself cracked and deformed, nearly bursting apart from the force of the impact. Sunny stared at his hand in shock, then awkwardly retrieved it from inside the devastated device and looked at the broken thing with dismay. Quote. Crap, now he was going to have to buy a new one, and replace all the food, and clean up all the mess. What the hell is wrong with me? Shaking his head, he put the empty glass bottle on the counter, sighed, and went to find a mop. Some time later, Sunny returned to the basement and approached the Dreamscape pod. He looked at it for a while, then turned around and paced around the armored dojo, frowning. Come on now, you've been preparing for this for a long, long time. As he paced, his whole presence slowly changed. The way Sunny walked, the way he held himself, the way his hands moved all became slightly different. There are 6 gods. The War God, also known as the God of Life. The Beast God, also known as the Goddess of the Moon. The Sun God. As he recited the names of the gods and their various aspects, the manner in which he spoke also changed. The difference was subtle, but noticeable. One after another, Sunny changed every little bit of behavioral traits that could be traced back to him. He had spent a lot of time training for this moment, using the physical malleability of a shadow dance practitioner to make himself unrecognizable. Surprisingly, the task had turned out much easier than he had thought. It was basically his specialty, anyway. Weaver's mask could protect his identity from all who would wish to learn it through magic, but he had to deal with mundane forms of identification on his own. After a while, when he was ready, Sunny undressed, approached the simulation pod, and climbed into its cradle. As the polished mask of black wood appeared on his face, the lid closed. A string of shimmering letters appeared in front of him. Enter Dreamscape. Yes, number. He sighed, then concentrated on the yes. A few moments later, his vision darkened. Sunny found himself standing in a boundless, black void. All around him, countless stars burned with ethereal light, an inconceivably complex weave of strings connecting them together. There was, however, no logic or sense in the pattern. He didn't feel any meaning hidden in the beautiful weave of the strings of light. It was just a pretty backdrop, and nothing more. A fake. Other than that, though, the simulation was pretty realistic. He looked down and saw his naked body, the soul serpent coiling around his arms and torso. The dreamscape recreated his appearance to the SMA, in great detail. Single quote. Shaking his head in bewilderment, Sunny summoned the mantle of the underworld. It weaved itself from black threads and covered his body. As soon as it did, a pleasant voice resounded in the darkness. Challenger, welcome to the dreamscape. Sunny summoned the autumn leaf, a small charm that allowed him to change the color of his hair. After a short hesitation, he made it appear white. What next? How do I fight people? The pleasant voice promptly responded. Before proceeding further, please choose an alias. He blinked a couple of times, then scratched the back of his head. Oh, right, an alias. After some thought, Sunny remembered the legend of Odysseus that Neff liked to talk about, and smiled. Nobody. That would be a good alias. He could already imagine how funny it would be to hear something like, nobody has defeated the enemy. Or, nobody has won. His thoughts, however, were interrupted by the voice of the dreamscape. Alias, nobody, is taken. Please choose another. He did not expect that. What would be a better alias? Is taken. Please choose another. What? No, wait. Alias, what? No, wait, is taken. Please choose another. Sunny shut his mouth, then thought for a while. His alias had to not only sound nice, but also be the opposite of what he would ever call himself in real life. Just like his movement and speech patterns, it had to be a part of the disguise. That's why coming up with one was not that easy. In the next few minutes, he tried a dozen different aliases, all to the same result. The level of coolness of the aliases he could come up with rapidly dropped, while the level of his irritation quickly rose. He felt as if the damn simulation was mocking him. Finally, Sunny growled in frustration and said the first word that came to his mind. Quote. Mongrel. The dreamscape was silent for a while. Then, it said, welcome, Mongrel. Please, choose a dream of your liking. Really, Mongrel. Well, mission accomplished, I guess. This is indeed the last thing I would want to be known as. Oh, the irony. As Sunny huffed and puffed from frustration, several images appeared in front of him. All contained depictions of different environments, although most looked like an arena of some sorts. From his research, Sunny knew that the choice of an arena decided what type of opponents he would get to fight against. Some were available to everyone, some required a certain number of victories to be accessed. Professional duelists all spent their time in those elite dreams. Dreams, what a stupid name. If I was dreaming, I would be on the Chained Islands right now, wouldn't I? His body was, indeed, awake right now. It's just that his mind was inside of an illusion. Regardless, what he needed was a place where he could fight sufficiently skilled amateurs without drawing too much attention. He knew just the place. Pointing at one of the images, Sunny said, there. A moment later, the black void disappeared, and he was suddenly somewhere else. A loud voice thundered from somewhere above. Challenger Mongrel has entered the Coliseum. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 393 to 393, Mongrel. 1,463 words. Sunny was standing on the floor of a vast oval arena. It was covered by sand, which had long ago turned red from all the blood spilled between these ancient walls. The merciless sun burned in the incandescent sky, and the smell of sweat, blood, and death assaulted his nostrils. How realistic. A little disturbed, Sunny looked around and saw tall amphitheater stands rising high above the blood-soaked arena. Those were the spectator seats. A crowd was cheering from them, their voices full of macabre fascination, cruelty, and glee. Both men and women were dressed in archaic robes that left their arms and shoulders bare. With bloodthirsty smiles contorting their features, they looked like a horde of lustful demons. Well, not all of them. Here and there, a strangely clothed person could be seen, observing the fights with a less barbaric expression. The people in archaic clothes were illusions, while the rest were actual observers. One didn't have to be connected to the dreamscape to spectate the duels, but some quirky fans preferred to be there in person to achieve the feeling of maximum immersion. Lunatics. Those damn simulation pods are too costly to use them for spectating. Even though Sunny wasn't poor anymore, seeing such extravagance still pained him. Shaking his head, he finally turned his attention to the arena itself. Obviously, this illusory environment wasn't very original, but on the other hand, it was a classic. More advanced dreams had vastly different decorations, ranging from realistic to completely fantastical, but for this low-level one, the company running Dreamscape chose a pretty basic narrative. It was an ancient coliseum, a place where slaves had once fought to entertain their masters, often to the death. Sunny didn't like it one bit. The coliseum was based on a historical structure, but was much larger. Hundreds upon hundreds of warriors roamed the sand of the battle arena, some engaged in fights, some searching for an opponent. Out here in the coliseum, most of the participants were awakened of high enough skill to be considered the elite among the amateurs, but not skillful enough to enter the professional leagues. Just what Sunny was looking for. Maybe. Overall, while many of the duelists in the dreamscape were talented fighters, at the end of the day, there were very few true masters among them. Real elites spilled blood in the dream realm, not in an illusion that had been conjured for the purpose of entertainment. So the level of competency of these people remained to be seen. Commanding the soul serpent to assume the form of the fearsome Odachi, Sunny put the blade of the great sword on his shoulder and waited to be challenged. Due to his menacing black armor and fearsome mask, however, people seemed to be reluctant to approach. At least for a while. Soon, a young swordsman in a striking blood-red armor approached, a long and graceful espadon resting on his shoulder. With a smile, he looked at Sunny and said, "Haven't seen you around before, Mongrel. Are you new to the Coliseum?" Sunny tilted his head and studied the letters that appeared around the swordsman. Paradise in red. Victories, 157 inches. Defeats, 103. Good enough. Lowering the Odachi, he answered in an even tone. Quote. I was born in the Coliseum. The swordsman smiled, then stepped forward. Let me welcome you back, then. The voice of the dreamscape immediately spoke, announcing the start of the fight. Paradise in red has challenged Mongrel. They clashed on the bloodied sand, moving with enough speed to cause the wind to howl through their armor. Sunny had left one of his shadows on the ground, and wrapped another one around the autumn leaf, where it could do him no good. He didn't want to be too strong, so that his opponents were not completely outmatched and could properly showcase their styles. As for himself, he had completely abandoned both the flowing style that Nephis had taught him and the grounded technique that he had learned from Saint, relying only on his ability to shadow the enemy's movements. Paradise in red was not a master of swordsmanship, but his skill level was not bad. Still, the young man wasn't a match for Sunny, even though he had to forego his practice techniques and wasn't used to wielding the great blade of the Odachi. The material form of the shadow serpent was truly formidable, but due to its size and nature, using it required a lot of adjustment. It was potentially far more devastating than any shorter blade could ever hope to be, but at the same time, demanded much more skill and strategy to be wielded efficiently. Any strike it delivered was potentially deadly, but so was every mistake made in the process. Sunny prolonged the fight for as long as he could, learning as much as possible from how his opponent moved and wielded the sword. In the end, however, the strain of the duel turned out to be too much for the other fighter. He wasn't very strategic at how he spent his soul essence, so after 5 minutes or so, his speed and strength decreased sharply. Sunny sighed and ended the duel with one precise slash of the soul serpent. The great sword flashed across the enemy's neck, sending his head flying into the air. The beheaded corpse fell to the ground in a rain of blood, then disappeared in a stream of sparks. The voice of the dreamscape thundered from above. Mongrel has won. Too bad. 5 minutes was not enough to truly learn the essence of a battle style. However, Sunny was certain that he would face another practitioner of this battle art eventually. There were not that many popular styles among the amateurs, after all. A few days or weeks later, he was bound to fight against someone with a similar technique again. Attracted by his flashy victory, a few more challengers approached. Sunny flourished the soul serpent, then stopped it abruptly midair. Drops of blood flew to the sand, leaving the dark blade perfectly clean. Under the mask, he grinned. Ah, so cool. Good thing that I learned this trick from Saint, too. Arg, are you even human? Another awakened fell to the sand, blood flowing from his mouth. Sunny took a step forward and slashed down with the shadow serpent, easily cutting through the opponent's light armor and splitting his body in half. The great sword he wielded was truly devastating. As the corpse disappeared, he cleaned the curved blade of the odachi with a swift flourish and answered with a dejected lie. Human, I am not, and have never been, a human. By that time, a small crowd of awakened had gathered around to spectate the fights and wait for their turn to challenge him. Hearing his words, one of them laughed. If you are not human, then what are you? Sunny glanced at him, then shrugged. A mongrel. Internally, though, he was thinking. Single quote. What the heck? In the past several hours, he had fought 27 people. And out of them, 25 had been using the same battle style. It was a practical, but rather simplistic art that relied on straightforward, efficient movements and attacks that were optimal in terms of lethality and energy expenditure, but for the same reason very predictable. In the hands of a master, the style could have been a real menace, but with these talented amateurs, it was useless against anyone with a tiny bit of clarity. Several of the aspects the challengers possessed had thrown him for a loop, but in the end, he had defeated them all one after another, gaining a solid grasp of the essence of their style by the 20th practitioner he fought. These people were not exactly untalented, but Sunny felt the difference between them and himself sharply. He had to remind himself that, unlike him, they had not spent a whole year fighting for their lives in the hell of the Forgotten Shore. Most of these young men and women had probably only experienced a handful of real battles in their entire lives, a few in the first nightmare, and a few on their way to the gateway. After that, they lived in well-protected citadels and only ventured outside the walls in large cohorts. If ever, disappointing. Although the counter of the Prince of the Underworld had grown by 27 victories, Sunny was slightly irritated. This was not what he had hoped for. Variety, he needed variety. He needed to create a truly versatile library of styles to allow Shadow Dance to be more efficient in the future. The more basic styles he learned, the easier it would be for him to shadow a truly unique technique if he needed to. As he was thinking that today was a complete bust, a sudden wave of whispers ran both through the crowd of the awakened fighters and the human spectators observing them from the stands. A dozen or so meters behind Sunny, a tall figure suddenly appeared out of thin air. When people saw the new arrival, their eyes widened. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 394 to 394, One Strike. 1,151 words. Leo Stryker appeared on the Coliseum and looked around with a bit of nostalgia. A few years ago, at the very start of his career, he had been a frequent visitor of this arena. This was where it all had started for him. Times had changed, of course. Using the few moments before he was recognized, Leo smiled widely and said, well, did you really think that I would forget about the public Mondays, guys? Of course not. This is a sacred tradition. Sacred, guys. Some of the Strikeforce veterans might remember how I started in the amateur arenas, and now that I am a brilliant, famous, and incredibly handsome celebrity, I have to return here from time to time. 2. Stay humble. There were currently around 20,000 people watching his broadcast, and pretty much all of them immediately exploded with a flood of mocking messages. Glancing at the broadcaster interface that Dreamscape provided to popular duelists like him, he grinned and winked, humored by some of the good-natured jabs thrown his way. Leo Stryker was not the most extraordinary fighter in the Dreamscape, but over these past few years, he had gathered a rather large following thanks to his skill, flair, and boisterous personality. He was so popular, in fact, that thousands of younger awakened became enamored with the battle style he and a few of his duelist buddies practiced. As the result, the Roaring Lion strike style had become all the rage among the amateur duelists, and his old mentor was now flooded by a deluge of new pupils. That fact really warmed Leo's heart. He was glad to be able to repay the old man for all his patience. Leo spent most of his days participating in top-level duels on the professional league arenas, but on Mondays, he liked to visit a public dream or two, chat with fans, fight a few amateurs and provide them with pointers as a way to give back to the community. Today was one such Monday. Looking around the Coliseum, Leo noticed a small gathering a dozen or so meters away from him and headed over. As he walked, he heard excited voices. Hey, isn't that Leo Stryker? No way, wait, it's him. I can recognize that gorgeous armor with my eyes closed. Leo, love you, man, keeping it real like always. Strikeforce roar. I've been watching your broadcasts for 2 years, Leo. A friendly smile appeared on his face. Waving at several fans, he approached the crowd of challengers and glanced at the lone figure standing in the empty space in the middle. Whoa, this dude has style. The man in the middle of the crowd wore a beautiful onyx armor that radiated a sense of solemn, dark menace. His face was hidden behind a fearsome black mask, with 3 twisting horns rising from it like a jagged crown. His hair was stark white, and there were 2 pools of impenetrable darkness in the place where his eyes were supposed to be. His weapon of choice was a long, curved odachi forged of lusterless black steel. It rested on his shoulder, seemingly devouring the bright light of the illusory sun. The stranger looked more like a demon than a human being. Leo let out an approving whistle. Is he also a broadcaster? Huh, I don't recognize those memories. He checked the stats of the demonic warrior. Mongrel, victories, 27, defeats, 0, a newbie, but a talented one. A perfect KDA, what a rarity. In any case, that guy was incredibly photogenic. A duel with him was not going to be interesting due to the gap in their skill, but it would definitely look stunning. Leo felt a little ashamed to break Mongrel's perfect streak, but this talented amateur would receive useful advice in return, which was far more beneficial. Who knows, they might meet again in the professional arena one day. Looking at the invisible camera, Leo raised an eyebrow and asked, "What do you say, Strike Force? Should we challenge that dark and handsome guy over there?" As the viewers expressed their approval, he approached Mongrel and gave him a friendly smile. "Hey there, friend, that's a big sword you got there. Do you even know how to use it?" Teasing the opponent was another sacred tradition of the dreamscape, and Leo was rather good at it. Mongrel shifted slightly and faced him. The disturbing mask stared at Leo, making him shiver slightly for no apparent reason. "No," Leo laughed. "No, you don't know how to use your sword. Well, would you like me to teach you?" The demonic warrior stared at him and didn't even move. "No, what's up with that dude? Does he not know other words? Come on, work with me here, buddy. I am dying here, trying to make this duel entertaining." With a sigh, Leo stepped forward and unsheathed his own blade. The viewers once again exploded with a flood of messages, and at the same time, the voice of the dreamscape announced. Quote. Leo Striker has challenged Mongrel. Goddammit. Sunny stared at the young man in a beautiful azure armor, cursing his luck. Why can't he get a hint? Even though Sunny couldn't say a word of truth while wearing Weaver's mask, he tried to communicate his reluctance to fight this guy. To no result whatsoever. He didn't have anything against the new challenger. What did the dreamscape call him? Leo. But there was one problem. Just from the way the young man walked, Sunny could tell that he practiced the same damned battle style that everyone else here seemed to practice. And Sunny had more than enough of it for one day. His time in the real world was limited, so he really hoped to experience a more diverse collection of opponents before it ran out. Maybe there's still hope. Maybe the next one is going to be different. It was better to finish this fight quickly, then. Sending the happy shadow from the autumn leaf to his body, Sunny lowered the shadow serpent and took a step forward. His opponent, meanwhile, smiled. "Let me teach you the first lesson. You should always wear a helmet into the battle, fool." Dashing forward, Sunny easily deflected Leo's blow and pierced his head clean through by continuing the same motion. As the corpse of the eloquent young man fell down and disintegrated into a rain of sparks, he flourished the odachi to clean it from blood, returned to his previous spot, and indifferently put it on his shoulder. "I swear to gods, the next person to challenge me better be using a different style. Otherwise, I might get angry." Leo Striker found himself standing in a boundless black void, his mouth agape. His viewers, too, were uncharacteristically silent. One strike, one strike. He killed me in one strike. He lingered for a few moments, then turned to the invisible camera and forced out an awkward smile. That was really unexpected, right guys? Then, his smile grew wide and sincere. "That, Strike Force, is what people call finding a diamond in a pile of, dung. Incredible luck. Yeah, definitely a stroke of luck. Oh, by the way, has anyone clipped it? Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report." Shadow Slave. Chapter 395 to 395. Roaring Lion, Hidden Dragon. 1,447 words. Leo sent the clip to a couple of his buddies and waited in the dark void, chatting with the viewers and laughing about his terrible performance in the duel against the demonic newbie. That mongrel, there's something about him. Just as he had expected, his friends joined him in the dreamscape almost immediately after receiving the message. Yes, his defeat was rather embarrassing, but there was an opportunity in every disaster. This was going to be a very special broadcast. A rare and bombastic, crossover episode. Answering the invitations, two figures joined him in the black void. The viewers grew silent for a moment, and then sent so many reactions that the broadcast interface almost crashed. Well, as expected, both guests Leo had invited were very prominent duelists, at least as popular as he was himself, or perhaps even more. One wore a heavy plate armor. There was a castle engraved on its breastplate, and 4 dragons depicted on his pauldrons and vambraces. This was Taoist Safer, a renowned swordsman who possessed a powerful aspect that allowed him to control fire. The other was a taciturn warrior in a grey silken robe. His alias in the dreamscape was the Fool, and he was known to be one of the most peculiar and persistent duelists in the professional league. Leo grinned. "Hey there, Safer. Hey there, Fool. Long time no see." Safer scoffed, then pointed at him. "Leo, my friend, what the hell was that? You got killed by an amateur, in one strike." The Fool simply shook his head and remained silent. Leo coughed in embarrassment and looked down. "Yeah, well, it's not like the two of you never tasted a piece of humble pie, is it? If I remember correctly, Queen Bee decimated both of you just last week." Safer grinned. "I am ready to be killed by our noble queen every day. But a newbie, come on." Leo shrugged, then pointed to his sword. All right, but there's a reason the two of you arrived so quickly, right? You saw it too." The two duelists glanced at each other, then slowly nodded. Leo turned to the camera and smiled brilliantly. "What, none of you battle geniuses have noticed it? Well, it's this rare moment when I get to mock my dear viewers and their insufferable expert advice." He gestured to his friends, then continued. "For those Strike Force veterans who still remember the early days of my broadcasting, as you might know, these two distinguished gentlemen are actually not only my colleagues but also disciples of the same cranky old man who taught me swordsmanship. Basically, the three of us are childhood friends, and we practice the same ingenious battle style. The Roaring Lion strike style." He paused, and then sighed mysteriously. "And while it hurts my pride a little to have been defeated by an unknown novice, the real reason why I was so shocked by our duel is, you won't believe it. Oh yeah, before we do this, I should mention the sponsor of today's." Safer rolled his eyes and interrupted him. "Cut it, Leo." What he was going to say is that the masked guy used the Roaring Lion strike style to defeat that dolt. And while there are many, lots and lots, really, people who can beat that loud nuisance in a heartbeat, the fact that someone done so while using our own style is very interesting. Leo glanced at his friend with vitriol, but then gave up on the ad break and nodded. "Indeed. So, the three of us are going to go and see who that mongrel really is, and what is he really capable of." Sunny felt that something weird was going on in the Colosseum after he dispatched the young man in azure armor. The other awakened seemed to stare at him with a bit of confusion, shock, even. The same went for the human spectators in the amphitheater. Many had changed seats to get closer to him. What's the matter with all these people? Did I go overboard and move too fast? But no, he had measured his dash to not appear too powerful. Maybe they just liked the spectacle. Sunny was, indeed, giving them a good show. Not that doing so was his intention. Anyway, why is no one challenging me? Stop wasting my time, people. I'm on a tight schedule. Indeed, no one in the small crowd of awakened that had been waiting for their turn to fight him seemed willing to step forward now. Sunny stared at them in boredom for a few minutes, trying to understand what was going on. They had been very eager just a few moments ago, no. Then, someone finally walked toward him, unsheathing a formidable-looking sword. The guy was wearing plate armor, with an intricate engraving of a castle and 4 dragons decorating its polished surface. He looked strong, noble, and experienced. You must be kidding me. The same style. He was obviously practicing the same damn style. As Sunny's eyes narrowed, the voice of the dreamscape announced, Taoist Safer has challenged Mongrel. Before the guy in plate armor could even attack, Sunny unceremoniously bashed him in the face with the pommel of the odachi, swiped his foot, and then viciously thrust the tip of the great sword into the narrow crack of his visor. As blood flowed from the steel helmet, the voice of the dreamscape thundered once again. Mongrel has won. The faces in the crowd grew a bit pale. What the hell is wrong with these people? Is there no one here who knows a different style? Before Sunny could even clean the blade of the shadow serpent, a new challenger approached. This one was wearing a grey silken robe. The fool has challenged Mongrel. The bastard was wielding a heavy saber, and using the same cursed battle art. Sunny let out a low growl and dashed forward. The fool turned out to be more nimble and aware than the last 2 fighters. He managed to sidestep the attack. Sadly, it had turned out to be just a feint. Before he could correct his footing, the odachi pierced his chest and exited from his back. Sunny tore the great sword out of the enemy's body and stepped back in frustration. The man in the grey silken robe swayed and stared at the growing red patch on his silk garment. Looking up at Sunny, he silently gave him a thumbs up, then collapsed to the sand in a rain of sparks. Mongrel has won. Curse it all. Do I need to go to a professional arena to find a proper opponent? These people were not, exactly, bad fighters, the 3 last ones especially, but why on earth were all of them so similar to each other? Sunny looked around and noticed that the Colosseum was deathly silent. Everyone was staring at him with strange expressions. Wait, don't tell me. He scowled behind the mask, a terrible suspicion entering his mind. Is this whole arena meant for practitioners of a single style? Was I breaking some unspoken taboo this whole time? That would be a bastard move. No, wait, that doesn't make any sense. I was using the same style as them. Suddenly, a familiar face approached him from the crowd. It was the young man in the azure armor. Lion beater, or whatever. No, oh gods, please no. I don't want to fight him again. The young man stopped a few meters away from Sunny, hesitated for a few moments, then smiled and asked in a light tone. Mongrel, my friend, if you don't mind me asking, what are you even doing here, in this amateur arena? Sunny rolled his eyes behind the mask. The answer was really simple. He was here to learn. But he couldn't say that, of course. He was also too frustrated to come up with a creative lie. Staring at the young man, he allowed the soul serpent to disappear and become a tattoo again, then said somberly. I am here to unlearn. Lion beater blinked a couple of times, then shifted his weight slightly, clearly intending to unsheath his sword. Enough of this. With an irritated huff, Sunny commanded the dreamscape to eject him from the arena and disappeared from the Colosseum in a shower of white sparks. Climbing out of the simulation pod, he stared at it with resentment, then suddenly flinched and grabbed his hand with another. No, we don't want the refrigerator accident to happen again, not to this beautiful, shiny, extremely expensive pod, right? Right, I should probably go and get some fresh air, try it again next time, on a more challenging arena. With that, he threw the last glance at the high-tech device, and walked away. What Sunny did not see, though, was the crowd of awakened back in the Colosseum, all staring at the empty space where he had stood a minute ago. Leo Stryker stared at it, too, a thoughtful expression on his face. A few seconds later, he said quietly, unlearn, share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave, Chapter 396 to 396, Viral Sensation. 1053 words. Sunny salvaged some food from the destroyed fridge, had a very late supper, and went down to the basement again, this time to travel to the chained aisles. By then, all shadow essence he had spent during the duels and to keep the mantle of the underworld from turning back to stone had already been restored. Wearing the onyx armor required a constant flow of essence to maintain the Feather of Truth enchantment active, if Sunny wanted to keep its weight sufficiently light, at least, and with the soul serpent assuming its weapon form, Sunny couldn't use the shadow to keep the expenditure to a minimum. Wearing the mantle for prolonged periods of time was rather draining. However, it was also a perfect way to train himself on how to manage essence most efficiently. He had no complaints. It was funny, though, that the dreamscape required a person to expend real essence despite being just an illusion. Oh well, climbing into his new, state-of-the-art sleeping pod, Sunny lay comfortably in the soft cradle and smiled. No more sore muscles. Finally, with that, he closed his eyes, and very quickly fell asleep. While his soul wandered the dream realm and his body slept, locked in an underground bunker behind multiple layers of protection, though. Several things happened in the real world. The clip of his short duel against Leo Stryker had unexpectedly gone viral. All around the planet, countless people watched it with a wide range of reactions. Some found it funny, some fascinating, while some simply scrolled past it as they watched their feeds. Even those who did not have any interest in the awakened duels found it striking, though. The image of an infernal wraith clad in black onyx armor defeating a charming, noble human warrior with one swift and ruthless strike was, indeed, very cinematic, just how Leo had predicted. Even if, to his dismay, the roles had ended up being switched. What's more, even though Sunny had not even known that their fight was being broadcasted, he accidentally looked directly at the invisible camera right after cruelly putting the tip of his odachi through the opponent's eye. The image of the fearsome black mask staring emotionlessly directly at them, 2 pools of darkness hiding the eyes of the human being behind it, sent shivers down the spines of people watching the clip. It was chilling, arresting, and strangely hypnotic. Many of them had the same question after watching the clip on repeat several times. Was there even a human there, behind the scary mask? People who follow the Dreamscape leagues, however, had an entirely different reaction. Although they, too, appreciated the undeniable aesthetic value of the short and striking duel, they paid more attention to the actual meaning of it. How could a completely unknown novice defeat an established and well-regarded duelist, someone as famous as Leo Stryker, in just one strike? The exact moment when Sunny delivered the deadly blow was analyzed, disassembled, and put under the microscope. Was it skill or pure luck? Was it intentional or accidental? Did Leo make a mistake, or was his mysterious adversary just that much better? The answer was rather confusing. No one had the slightest idea. Obviously, once people became curious, they didn't stop on just that one viral clip. Rather swiftly, every fight and every word that Sunny had uttered during his infuriating visit to the Dreamscape were found and published for everyone to see. Once people saw the contents of those recordings, the whole duelist circle was violently shaken. One shock was followed by another, and then by yet another, still. The first thing that people found during their investigation was two more short clips. One showed Mongrel killing Taoist Safer in the span of a single second. The other showed Mongrel killing the Fool, once again, with a single ruthless strike. All in all, it took him less than a minute to easily crush three of the most renowned young duelists in the world. They weren't the absolute elite, but still some of the best the Dreamscape had to offer. The conclusion was obvious. His victory over Leo Stryker was neither lucky nor accidental. Mongrel was, indeed, just that much better. But how could that be? Was he some other famous duelist in disguise? People continued to dig, coming to a bewildering conclusion. The man who called himself Mongrel had never entered Dreamscape before that day. His profile showed only two pieces of information: victories, 30, defeats, 0, and status, offline. After that, many theories appeared postulating that Mongrel was, in fact, a master who had visited the Dreamscape to have fun. There weren't that many masters in the world, and all of them had much more crucial things to do than spend their time having illusory duels. Even if they did, however, those duels transpired in private arenas that were created specifically for the occasion, away from the public eye. Still, if Mongrel was a master, that would explain it all. He was just much stronger. But he wasn't. That theory was debunked when the recordings of his other 27 duels were unearthed. After watching them, the investigating enthusiasts became truly shaken, and for a very strange reason. It was because those recordings showed Mongrel actually struggling against much weaker opponents. Now wait a minute, what the hell did that mean? How could a man struggle against novices, fighting them for an average of 5 to 10 minutes, and then kill 3 experienced professionals in 3 seconds? The answer was simply mind-boggling. While people who did not know much about combat techniques assumed that Mongrel had been just pretending to be weak, more knowledgeable experts came to a stunning conclusion. Mongrel only used the styles of his opponents to fight against them. He came into the Colosseum not knowing anything about the popular Roaring Lion strike style, and mastered it in the span of a single evening to such degree that even the Fool, Taoist Safer, and Leo Stryker himself, the 3 fighters who had popularized the style in the first place, couldn't resist him even for a couple of seconds. Now, it was the experts' turn to shiver. Ironically, after understanding what exactly had transpired, they were left with the same question that the people who knew knowing about awakened duels had after watching the viral clip. Was the being wearing the black wooden mask even human? And all of them, regardless of their interests and level of knowledge about battle arts, were now wondering the same. Quote. Who the hell is Mongrel? Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 397 to 397, Mongrel's Wisdom. 1010 words. In the absence of any new information, people had no choice but to look back at the existing recordings of Mongrel. Fascinated by the mysterious demonic warrior, they disassembled his every action and every word, trying to find some hint to his identity, background, and standing. Although there was not much to learn, they gradually came to perceive his sayings as rather meaningful. In fact, people ended up finding too much meaning in them, even though there was none. It was all just awkward lies Sunny had come up with on the spot to fulfill the requirements of that simple trick. He had never, ever intended to say something profound. But when had good intentions ever stopped people from overcomplicating things? Without Sunny knowing anything about it, Mongrel had gained a philosophy. Are you new to the Colosseum? Quote. I was born in the Colosseum. Sitting in a school cafeteria, 2 students stared at a cheap communicator, their eyes burning with enthusiasm. One of the boys frowned, then asked in confusion. I don't get it, what does he mean? Isn't the Colosseum just a dreamscape arena? How could a person be born there? His friend shook his head with disdain. Idiot, don't you get it? Mongrel doesn't mean that he was born in the dreamscape. He means that he was born in battle. Those ancient gladiators were slaves forced to fight to the death against their will. Aren't awakened the same? They are infected by the spell and have no choice but to battle nightmare creatures to survive. In a sense, all awakened were born in the Colosseum. Somewhere in the outskirts, several workers had gathered together during their short break. Are you even human? What is a human? I am not, and have never been, a human. One of the workers shivered. Scary, do you think that Mongrel is actually a nightmare creature that infiltrated the real world? Another shook his head. No, of course not. The first sighed. Then why would he say that he's not human? The second worker looked at the dirty tunnel of the industrial air filter exhaust they were cleaning, then at his own calloused hands. What the hell does it even mean, to be a human? Do you think that you and I are really humans? No, you fool. That Mongrel has more brains than you, I swear. He at least understands that just having 2 legs and 2 hands does not make you a human. He gets how it is. The third listened to their conversation and grimaced. So what? Yeah, he gets it, but I don't see him complaining. That guy took the hand he was dealt and turned himself into a damn sword demon. What have you done? That's the lesson he is trying to teach us, I think. No one will treat you as a human unless you behave like one. Far away, in the sleeper compound of the academy, a group of young men and women were looking at a screen. That's a big sword you got there. Do you even know how to use it? No, you don't know how to use your sword. Well, would you like me to teach you? No, one of the sleepers scratched the back of his head, then asked. I don't get it. Why did Mongrel lie about not knowing how to use a sword? He is obviously a very experienced fighter. Maybe even a legacy. Was he trying to trick Leo into underestimating him? A girl standing near him chuckled. He didn't lie. Why would Mongrel need to trick Leo? He would win against him fair and square, regardless. No, there's a deeper meaning in his words. The other sleeper raised an eyebrow. What meaning? The girl smiled knowingly. Only a boastful duelist like Leo Stryker would claim to know his way around a sword. A true master, one who battles nightmare creatures in the dream realm instead of playing games with pampered awakened in the dreamscape, would know that they have infinitely more yet to learn than they already know. That's what Mongrel meant. No matter how good he is, he understands that in the grand scheme of things, his skill and power are like that of an infant. Her friend was quiet for a while, then asked. If that's the case, then why did he say that he doesn't want to learn more? The girl shook her head. He didn't say that he doesn't want to learn. He said that he doesn't want Leo to teach him. The true enemy of an awakened is the spell, not other humans. That's why Mongrel doesn't want to be taught by battling humans. Even if he has to. And also, if someone is strong like Mongrel, they can end a fight with one strike. But true strength is not needing to strike at all. Maybe that's what Mongrel wants. To become powerful enough so that he never has to bear his sword again. And just a few hundred meters away from them, on her way to the Academy Hospital complex, a young woman in a wheelchair was staring at her communicator with an amused expression on her face. What are you doing here, in this amateur arena? I am here to unlearn. This quote, especially, had become a topic of heated discussion across the network. Among the duelists, it caused a whole philosophical storm. Countless awakened were passionately debating its meaning. No one knew what exactly Mongrel meant, but everyone had at least a theory. The only thing everyone agreed on was that his short statement hid profound, fundamental wisdom about the nature of combat and ways to become a master of it. Not Effie, though, looking at her communicator, she shook her head and said, to unlearn, that guy must have hit his head one too many times. What a dimwit. Then, she looked at the image once again, and added. And also, what's up with that armor? It looks so familiar. For a moment, I thought that Sunny's echo had run wild. What a fun idea. The look on his face would have been priceless. With that, she shook her head, deactivated the communicator, and continued on her way. Effie had more important things to do than waste her time thinking about mongrels. The rest of the world, though, apparently did not. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 398 to 398. Master of his trade. 1032 words. Blissfully oblivious to the storm his visit to the dreamscape was causing back in the real world, Sunny opened his eyes on the altar island of the sanctuary. Because of how much time he had spent fruitlessly searching for worthy opponents on the Colosseum, he arrived on the chained isles much later than he usually would. The sunset was still a few hours away, and the sky was clear and bright. He was welcomed by the familiar murmur of flowing water, the rustling of leaves, and a cool breeze. Sunny flinched slightly and threw a resentful glance at the deep pool of clean water surrounding the small piece of land on which the altar and the ancient tree stood. During his first visit to the sanctuary, Saint Tyrus herself had brought him here from the real world. Both of them had appeared near the altar. There had been a small problem, though. Sunny had materialized a bit further than people usually did, and as the result, plunged straight into the pool instead of landing on solid ground. Not a big setback, however, in a moment of disorientation, he almost had a heart attack. Falling into water reminded him of his first minutes on the forgotten shore just too much. For a second, he had thought that he was back in that godforsaken place. Ever since that day, Sunny never ended up in the water instead of on the soil of the altar island again, but the scare that first time had given him was still fresh in his memory. Not today. With a triumphant smirk, he left the white altar behind and headed toward the ring of tall menhirs. Now that it was day, the sanctuary looked more populated. Groups of awakened rested on the grass of the park, some discussing upcoming ventures into the wilderness, some simply killing time until they were able to return to the real world. One couldn't just enter the gateway immediately after appearing in the dream realm. Perhaps because the soul wasn't able to withstand traveling between worlds too often, perhaps because the spell did not wish for them to return too quickly, or perhaps for some another, unknown reason, awakened had to wait several hours before being allowed to use a gateway again. The exact time they had to wait was slightly different from person to person, but in general, it was somewhere around 10 hours. During these hours, those awakened who did not wish to risk their lives in the wild expanses of the dream realm usually went about their business or fulfilled their duties to the citadel. A lot of work went into keeping human enclaves in the dream realm going. Apart from the obvious demand to keep watch on the walls and fight off attacking nightmare creatures, mundane tasks like cleaning and preparing food were also shared among the inhabitants of the citadels. In a sense, each citadel was a settlement, some were small, some large enough to house thousands upon thousands of the awakened. The population of the three great citadels was even higher, with hundreds of thousands of humans visiting them every day. The sanctuary was a rather tiny citadel, in comparison, so each of the awakened anchored here had to do their share of work to preserve it. Luckily, Sunny had been assigned a role of an advanced scout. In exchange for his reports about the things he noticed during his expeditions and the movements of nightmare creatures across the isles, he was all but freed from other tasks, only occasionally having to do a small chore or stand watch during the darkest hours of the night. He was rather happy with that situation. Sunny greeted a few people he was on somewhat friendly terms with, entered the interior of the sanctuary, then headed to his room. Now was a good time to finish the things he had not done during his last visit. Namely, exchange the soul shard he had collected for memories or credits, and to properly study the ancient coin to draw and describe it for teacher Julius later. But the useless coin could wait. Right now, Sunny really wanted to satiate his avarice. Unlocking the chest that stood at the foot of his bed, he fished out the soul shards off its bottom and unceremoniously threw them into the pack. The strange fruits he had gathered during his last journey also went there, leaving the chest more or less empty. Noticing the golden coin glinting between a few curios that Sunny had collected in the past 2 months, he hesitated for a moment, then shrugged, picked it up, and hid it under one of the puppeteer shrouds of embraces. All set, it was time to haggle. Returning to the park contained within the inner circle of the sanctuary, Sunny glanced at the awakened gathered there, walked over to a big, sun-washed rock, and sat down on it. Taking out the soul shards, he placed them on its surface and waited patiently, pretending to be bored and indifferent. It almost looked as if he was simply enjoying the sun, while the soul shards had somehow appeared near him by accident. In the beginning, Sunny had to walk around and initiate trades, but by now, the inhabitants of the sanctuary had already caught wind of the fact that he often had soul shards to trade. Sunny just had to keep his trading operation seemingly humble, at least on the surface. If people knew how many nightmare creatures he really killed, things would become a bit difficult. He was known to be from the Forgotten Shore, which gave him a bit of leeway of how deadly of a hunter he could appear to be, but it was still wise to keep the full extent of his competency to himself. Of all the people on the chained island, only Saint Tyrus and her trusted aides knew about his SS evaluation. So whatever soul shards Sunny didn't sell to the local awakened, he sold directly to the White Feather clan, leaving all parties satisfied by the arrangement. Soon, the first customer approached, looking at the gleaming crystals with burning eyes. Sunny smiled brightly. Oh, hey there, looking to trade for a shard or two? Well, you're in luck, my friend. Sunny's brilliant emporium is currently open for business. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 399 to 399, Golden Coin. 980 words. If there was one thing Sunny missed about the Forgotten Shore, it was how scarce the resources out there were. As the result, the value of soul shards was way higher there than back in the real world. Well, the parts of the dream realm that were better connected to the real world, at least. Not that shards were cheap here. It's just that the deals Sunny was able to make were not as lucrative as the ones he had made in the Dark City. He was also not able to bring the soul shards back to the real world with him, which also affected the final price. In the end, the collection of crystals he had gathered during his last trip through the Chained Island, including those retrieved from fallen creatures, only landed him 3 memories of questionable utility. He fed them to Saint, bringing her shadow fragment counter to 163 200ths. Not bad, I guess. After concluding his business in the park, Sunny went to the kitchens and traded the fruits he had found for a bunch of credits. The fruits were a very rare commodity on the Chained Isles. They could not be made into anything even remotely useful or advantageous, but some bright mind in the sanctuary had once come up with a method to make them into a very hard-hitting and tasty wine. Sunny himself had sworn off alcohol after his experiences on the Forgotten Shore, but he wasn't against making some money from it. In the early days of the sanctuary, the wine was all the rage among the local awakened. Not too long after it had been established, most of the man-eating vines that grew the fruits had been hunted down to extinction on the island surrounding the citadel. Now, only people who went further and risked their lives more had a chance to find several fruits, so the cost was rather substantial. That should, buy me a new fridge, I think. Sunny had only a very vague idea of how much refrigerators cost, but suspected that this recent exchange would be enough to cover the expenses of shopping for a new one. All in all, he was satisfied with the result of his recent expedition. He was progressing at a steady pace and slowly gathering everything he needed to make it even faster. Just in time, considering that Nephis was days away from becoming a devil. With a slight frown, he exited the ring of menhirs and looked up. The trades took him several hours to complete, so it was already night. The crescent moon was visible in the dark sky, and the winds grew cold and forceful. Up above, heavy clouds were gathering. I think it's going to rain. Suddenly in a sullen mood, Sunny sighed and thought about his plans. Usually, he would be charting out a route for his next venture into the Isles, either going for a yet unexplored ruin or a habitat of the nightmare creatures he was preparing to challenge and kill. But these excursions took several days to complete, and he had a lot of business to take care of in the real world right now. Can I return already? He had only spent around 4 hours in the dream realm, but sometimes, that was enough, for him, at least. Sunny had no idea why his experience with the gateways was different from most other people, but suspected that it was either because of his 2 cores or because of the fact that he had spent an entire year in this dead world even before becoming an awakened. Maybe that spark of divinity had something to do with it, too. In any case, he tended to avoid returning to the real world too fast too often, in order to not attract unnecessary attention. Today, however, he was willing to forego extra caution. The things waiting for him back there were very important, or at least pressing. With a shrug, Sunny headed toward the altar island. Walking on the stone path in complete darkness, he looked up at the veil of clouds hiding the moon and sighed. Not like I would really want to venture out in the rain, anyway. Approaching the white monolith of the altar, Sunny hesitated for a few moments, then put his hand on it. Nothing happened. Single quote. Oh, I guess it's too early, after all. What a disappointment. With nothing to do but kill time and wait for the opportunity to activate the gateway, Sunny paced a little, stared at the depths of the clear pool, then paced some more. Finally, he returned to the altar and grabbed the handle of the obsidian knife laying on its surface, purely out of boredom. Sunny strained every muscle in his body and tried to lift the damn thing, but no matter how hard he pulled, the knife didn't move even by a millimeter. Move, damn you. However, there was no response. Giving up, Sunny grimaced and let go of the knife. Well, that's a bust, again. As he did so, though, a heavy gold coin slid out from under his vambrace and fell on the polished surface of the altar with a melodic ring. It rolled a few times and then landed flat, the face of the beautiful person with the image of the crescent drawn on their forehead looking at him with a carefree smile. Oh, right, I had forgotten about that thing. Sunny moved his hand to pick up the coin, but at that moment, the veil of clouds split slightly, letting through a beam of pure, pale moonlight. The light fell on the coin and made it gleam. A moment later, the surface of the coin suddenly shone with ethereal radiance. The features of the person etched on it became sharper, then disappeared into the light. When the light dissipated, the coin was gone. Sunny stared at the empty spot where it had been just a few seconds ago with a bewildered expression. It was then when the spell suddenly whispered into his ear. Your shadow grows stronger. Share to your friends. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report. Shadow Slave. Chapter 400 to 400, Call of Treasure. 1065 words. Your shadow grows stronger. Sunny stared at the place where the coin used to be, then blinked. What just happened? He dropped the coin on the altar, it was illuminated by the moonlight, and disappeared. And then, he received a shadow fragment. No way. Holding back excitement, Sunny summoned the runes and read. Shadow fragments, 198 2000ths. The last time he checked, there was only 197. He had definitely, without a doubt, just received a shadow fragment from the strange golden coin. So it wasn't an ordinary coin, after all. A satisfied smile appeared on his lips. Not only was the coin special, it was even not cursed. On the contrary, it was blessed. Well, that was the easiest shadow fragment I have ever received. Suddenly, his eyes widened. Wait, weren't there more coins he had left behind on the Iron Hand Island? 3 more, at least, had been swallowed by the dead monstrosity. Before the thought fully formed in his mind, Sunny was already leaving the altar island. There are two things. The first one was that other coins could, potentially, turn out the same as the first one and reward him with free fragments. The second one was that where there were 3, there could be more, much more. The fallen demon he had discovered could have come from a place where a whole treasure trove of miraculous coins was hidden. A whole mountain of them, even. If Sunny was right and managed to somehow trace the path the creature took before dying. Who knew how much more powerful he would become? Trying to suppress the giddy feeling of discovering a huge and tantalizing secret, Sunny left the sanctuary and headed toward the edge of the island. As the sound of waterfalls grew louder and the first drops of rain fell to the ground, a dark silhouette suddenly took a step towards him. It was one of the watchmen. Huh, Sunny, right. Are you really going to go out in that weather? Most of the watchmen here in the sanctuary already knew that he was comfortable in the dark, so their initial surprise about seeing someone leave the citadel at night had more or less disappeared by now. It was still strange for some of them, though. Sunny halted for a few moments, then smiled. Yeah, don't worry, I will be fine. I'm not going far, anyway. Just want to check something on the Iron Hand Island. The watchman hesitated, then shrugged. Alright, be careful out there. Night vision or not, this is not the time for humans. Sunny thanked the man for his concern, then walked past him. Not the time for humans. Good thing I am a monster, then. Approaching the edge of the sanctuary island, he didn't waste any time and summoned the Dark Wing. Sunny was tempted to simply turn into a shadow and rush toward his goal, but he didn't want to show his powers near the citadel so openly. Patient, be patient. Since the Dark Wing couldn't really allow him to fly, he glided above the chain for as long as he could, then landed on it and continued forward on foot. By that time, the rain was already falling rather heavily. The iron surface beneath his feet was treacherous and slippery, so Sunny had to be careful and watch his step, lest he plummeted down into the sky below. He shivered, trying to think of a more terrible fate. With no means of real flight, he would just be falling through the darkness, endlessly, until his mind was gone and his body consumed itself from hunger, then slowly turned into dust. People on the chained isles loved to tell horrible stories about unfortunate souls who fell into the below, and Sunny could easily understand their fear. For that reason, he was very careful not to slip. Only fools fall down, knowing what waits for them below. I would never. As if to answer his thought, a gust of wind suddenly crashed into him from the side, and a distant bolt of lightning illuminated the sky. Single quote. To hell with this. Not wishing to tempt fate, Sunny dove into the shadows and continued his journey as one of them. Soon, he arrived on the Iron Hand Island. The severed arm of the unknown metal giant was still there, making Sunny wonder once again what force could have torn it off the creature's body. Judging by the size of that thing, the owner of the arm must have been of monstrous proportions itself. Not really on the same scale as the walking colossus of the Forgotten Shore, but still undeniably gigantic. The remains of the winged demon that had swallowed the mysterious coins were there, too. However, they did not look the same. By now, only the bones of the fearsome abomination remained, all its flesh long devoured by the gluttonous scavengers of the nightmare world. The grass around the carcass was now higher, too, and had changed its color from the usual green to bright red. The grass looked satiated. Sunny grimaced. Out here in the dream realm, no creature or plant was really what they seemed. Otherwise, the thick forest on the island where he had battled the pack of fallen wolves would have been long ago destroyed by the crushing. Even the most innocent things were twisted, corrupted, and predatory. Without sufficient caution, even a blade of grass could be deadly. But he wanted those coins. Approaching the wide patch of blood-red grass, Sunny hesitated for a bit, and then took a step forward. He felt the ground moving slightly beneath him, the rustling of the raindrops changing tone as they fell on the grass. With a deep frown, Sunny summoned the moonlight shard and circulated his essence, sending it flowing furiously through the coils of the soul serpent. He also collected both his shadows and wrapped them around his body. The grass swayed slightly, and then grew still. A subtle smile appeared on Sunny's lips. Indeed, everything in the dream realm was dangerous and deadly, including humans. In fact, awakened were perhaps one of the most fearsome tribes of creatures in this world, if not in terms of raw power, then at least due to their cunning, wickedness, and unpredictability. For something as weak as a blade of grass, it was wise to avoid angering one of the awakened, especially one as dreadful as Sunny. Ah, it feels nice to be feared. With nothing threatening him anymore, he walked over to the spot where he had seen the coins last and bent down, trying to find the alluring golden discs. They were just where he had left them. Share to your friends. Enjoying this site? Support us via PayPal, Visa, MasterCard or crypto. Your donations help cover site maintenance and hosting costs. Tap the middle of the screen to reveal reading options. If you find any errors, non-standard content, ads redirect, broken links, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Report.